The following is a compilation of my previous 6 Bakemonogatari analysis videos to give you one big supercut of the ultimate Bakemonogatari definitive analysis. Please enjoy. Bakemonogatari's Hitagi Crab is the first arc in the Monogatari series, and one that lays much of the groundwork for the series and the kind of story it is trying to tell. And this video is the first in a new series on this channel, which will analyse each of Monogatari's arcs, discussing their character arcs, themes, messages, and of course breaking down the openings and endings to help both myself and you the viewer to understand this incredible story even better. So if that sounds interesting to you, then strap in for the first video in this new series, where we will explore the beauty that is Bakemonogatari's Hitagi Crab. So if you find yourself entertained at any point during the video, then consider liking, subscribing and ringing that bell, as I cannot explain to you how much just a small action can do for this channel, and if you want to support this channel even further, then perhaps check out my Patreon. Anyway, on with the video. Hitagi Crab is an arc about Senjogahara Hitagi, about her overcoming her oddity affliction, the heavy crab. The arc starts with Araragi catching her when she falls down the stairs. He notices her weightlessness and as such is assaulted and threatened by her. This action defines much of Senjogahara in this arc. She is aggressive, violent and a tsundere. I'll explain the far deeper thematics around her being a tsundere later in the video, but the point is that she pushes others away. She keeps others at arm's reach. She acts distant and isolates herself. If people do come close, she fends them off with stationery. She weaponizes stationery to protect herself, to keep people at arm's reach so they can't touch her body. She is scared of letting people come close to her due to the trauma of her past, of her being assaulted by a cult member. It is a deeply rooted fear that kept her isolated even from the people that genuinely cared for her. It was an unhealthy but completely understandable defense mechanism. However, it was a small fry compared to the much larger defense mechanism she adopted, and that was trusting an oddity. The heavy crab or heavy stone crab was an oddity that took away her weight. In the physical sense it took most of her mass, but on another level it also took her emotional burden. Her memories of her mother, the ones that caused her pain and weighed her down, were snipped away by the crab's claws. Her feelings of trauma, her feelings of betrayal, her feelings of sadness and her feelings of guilt for in her mind breaking up the family by resisting being assaulted. Senjogahara was freed of these feelings that weighed her down, of her trauma, but that didn't make her feel any better. The reason though that she was still left with 5 kilograms of weight, why not all her weight was taken by the crab, is because this remaining 5 kilograms is symbolic of the fact you cannot truly detach yourself from your problems, you can't run away from them. The shadow of them will always hang over you. Even if you get close you cannot truly escape them, hence a small piece of her weight remains. You can't remove the burden completely unless you confront it. Any other method will still leave some of it hanging over you. She got rid of most of her memories and emotions, but those that remained still cause her despair and pain. The reason she is so pessimistic and down in this arc is precisely because of the feelings of guilt she still felt. In her mind she caused the collapse of her family, so she didn't think it right for her to be optimistic while her parents were left ruined. A key point raised in this arc that echoes into every future part of the series is that you cannot just unload your burdens and turn away from them, that just putting off an issue will not solve it. Yes, it is the classic you can only save yourself all on your own, and in Senjogahara's case this is incredibly true. The crab did help her, it answered her prayers as a god does, but it didn't save her, it just held onto her weight for her. She may have physically been separated from the weight, but it wasn't gone, it still existed. Senjogahara, with prompting from Araragi, visited Oshino and agreed to confront the crab. She asked it for her weight back and it obliged. It wasn't an epic fight or anything like that, she just simply asked. And that's very much important. It wasn't a big fight because the issue was all internal. It wasn't so much about confronting the crab as an entity, but Senjogahara accepting she needs to take back on the burden and deal with it herself. The crab was just a metaphor for her putting off the issue, of running away and being too scared to deal with it. She overcomes her issue by accepting the feelings are hers, and hers alone, that only she can work through them. However, a key point is that you don't have to do it alone. You don't have to take the entire burden yourself. This is why Araragi gained some of her weight at the end of the arc, as he took some of the burden alongside her. Friendship and support makes her stronger. That is another key message of the arc. Araragi didn't save her, he just helped her. He pointed her in the right direction and took some of the burden alongside her. But the one to make the decision, the one to deal with the weight of those feelings, was Senjogahara. And that is the story that Hitagi Crab tells. That is Senjogahara's character arc across this arc, and a very abridged summation of the themes of the arc, but we can obviously go a lot deeper. But before we address each individual theme and how they're explored in this arc, why don't we first look at the beauty that is. Staple Stable is an opening about staples, the significance being that Senjogahara is trying to keep her life together as if she is stapling it together. The staples keep her life stable. The stapler is also one of her main stationary weapons, these being a defense mechanism she adopted to keep others at bay. She will weaponize anything, even everyday harmless items like stationery. That is the level of desperation she will go to in order to protect herself. The moving staplers we see in the opening then represent Senjogahara. They move all around the city in all directions, searching for something, which may be a metaphor for Senjogahara's constant search for a cure to her condition. Or another way to look at it is that since the staplers leave staples everywhere they go, this is a big metaphor for the before mentioned idea that Senjogahara is trying to staple herself together. The black and white world of the opening could represent her own world, and she is trying to keep it together with this army of staplers. The whole opening is very somber and gloomy, with grey backgrounds that represent Senjogahara's life, devoid of feelings and emotion. In this opening she is yet to take her weight back, and so she sees the world as grey and empty. The lack of people apart from herself symbolises her isolation. She pushed all others away till it's almost like she is the lone person in an entire city. This might also be why the opening uses real life visuals. These clash with Senjogahara, who is animated. She feels out of place, disconnected and distant from the backgrounds, another metaphor for her isolation. Another strange thing is that Senjogahara is giant and more so has weight. So I imagine this giant Senjogahara is less meant to be Senjogahara herself and more a representation of her burden, hence the size and weight. It is too much for one person to bear alone. The focus on train tracks probably symbolises a journey, as this arc is about Senjogahara undergoing a journey to regain her weight. Besides the visuals though, there are also the lyrics. The song is basically about Senjogahara and Araragi. It's from her point of view, pushing him away and then relying on him for support. It's about her forming a friendship with him and finding someone else to take the burden alongside her. There's a bit of tsundere elements in it at the start, but these fade away into her true feelings of care and a desire to be with him. There's even a nice reference to their date in Tsubasa Cat. With the lyrics in mind, maybe the significance of the staplers is actually not her trying to staple together her world, but instead to staple Araragi to her to form a connection with him, so he can take on the burden alongside her. Again, there's so many ways to look at it. And since I can only really look at the English translation of the lyrics, I won't do any deeper lyrical analysis, as I still don't have a good enough understanding of the nuances of Japanese to make any meaningful inferences without, possibly being really off base. Also, there's staplers doing the hanky-panky, which probably ties into the importance of sexuality in this arc, or it's just a funny lols moment. The arc is called Hitagi Crab, but why a crab? Of all animals to pick, why is the crab used to represent Senjogahara? Well, it's actually a really clever choice, as Senjogahara is a tsundere, which may sound completely unrelated, but let me explain. A tsundere by most definitions is a character who is angry and aggressive on the outside, but soft and delicate on the inside. And well, what is a crab? They are hard on the outside with their carapace and aggressive with their pincers, but inside, they are soft and delicate. A crab is a tsundere when framed in a literal light, which is why Senjogahara isn't really as much of a tsundere after this arc, as she has taken back her weight and is no longer being symbolised by a crab. There's other bits of crab symbolism too, like how her star sign is Cancer, or the very fun reference when Oshina goes to crush the crab underfoot, which is a nod to the myth of the 12 labours of Heracles, where the demigod crushes the giant crab Karkanos under his foot. The heavy crab though is said to be just one form of this kami, the others being a rabbit and a beautiful woman, and I of course think these are important too. Rabbits represent moving forward in Japan, so maybe the fact it didn't appear as a rabbit to her is because she is not able to move on. The kami took the form of a crab to bear her burden, it couldn't be seen as a rabbit as she was not ready to move forward. And perhaps it didn't appear as a beautiful woman, because Senjogahara was yet to see herself as a woman. Remember, the crab, and so in this case the woman, represents Senjogahara. She is still vulnerable in this arc, she is still a girl at heart, not a woman. She even comments on this, saying her body isn't worth the jail time to Araragi. She still sees herself as the little girl that was assaulted, and so only in Nisei Monogatari does she mature enough to be called a woman, something symbolised by her and Araragi likely undergoing the act. Another thing to note is how, as Araragi says, the moon looks like a crab and a beautiful woman when not viewed from Japan. This could further symbolise her isolation. The god took the form of a crab which cannot be seen from Japan, as she is isolated from others, she is like an outsider. So at least through this line of thinking, the god did not appear as a rabbit to her, as she was not ready to move forward, or as a beautiful woman because she still didn't see herself as one. It became a crab as that best fitted her, soft on the inside but hard on the outside. Her stationary weapons and just her general actions of pushing people away being symbolic of the crab's carapace. She came out of her shell and shed her carapace, hence this is why she no longer wields stationery after this arc. Even the pen she holds in her pocket vanish after this arc, and further this is why she is open to closing the distance with others, making new friends of Hanekawa and rekindling friendships like with Kambaru. She is no longer a crab, just a girl, and soon to become a woman. Now obviously the idea that her weight being taken is a metaphor for her burden being lightened is pretty apparent, and I don't need to dedicate a section of the video to that idea, but one thing I think is worth mentioning is her physical weight itself being lost. Hanekawa mentions how Senjogahara became prettier from middle school to high school, and also that she became more closeted. She stopped being sporty and social and ended up closeted and quiet, the cause of this of course being her weight loss. And in Hanekawa's words, this made her appear prettier. Of course correlation doesn't equal causation, but this is Monogatari, so I doubt this piece of dialogue was there for nothing. Maybe this is a comment on how weight loss is seen in society as prettier, that only ultra thin women are attractive. After all, Hanekawa also says that boys like frail girls, but I'm not too sure. Instead, I don't think her becoming prettier is a result of her weight loss, but more from her isolation. She seems more like a princess, you just admire her from afar, less like a person and more like an idol. The more she isolates herself from people, the more people take notice of her. She really becomes a closeted princess, which is quite ironic since it's only after a weight loss that she goes from living in health to basically poverty. Perhaps that in of itself is a comment on appearances not matching the truth, which could link into how nobody wanted to truly help Senjogahara and just looked away, but it's hard to say. What I would conclude though is that the more she isolated herself, the more attractive she became to others, and that this is a commentary on how we and society as a whole prefers to find beauty in things we can admire from afar, people we never interact with, as that frees us from the issues of emotional baggage and relationships. That we as people prefer not to get involved if it's easier to just admire from afar, which of course represents how nobody helped Senjogahara, all until Araragi came along, someone who doesn't conform to social norms. Sexuality, or fan service if you will, is one of the most polarising aspects of Monogatari, and although I do believe the majority of it is artistic and purposeful, you can't deny that some of it, especially with certain characters, is a bit close or over the mark for most people. That all said, you can't deny how important sexuality in Monogatari is for exploring all manner of themes and ideas. And Hitagi Crab is an arc that fully utilises this in order to explore the vulnerability of Senjogahara without having to put it into words. The big fanservice scene in this arc is when Senjogahara showers and then changes in front of Araragi. Araragi and us the viewers see all this as fanservice. It's almost like she is purposely flaunting her body in some kind of teasing act. We're meant to lust over her body as if it is a carrot laid out for us to eat. However, the scene then gets flipped on its head when it's revealed that no, she isn't trying to be raunchy, is that the clothes feel so heavy to her that it is painful for her to change. Us misunderstanding her situation is exactly the same as how nobody ever helped her, preferring to just watch her from afar. It's easier to just accept it's fun fan service than that she's actually in distress and pain. It's easier to see the surface level, a naked girl, rather than look deeper at a distressed and vulnerable person. Another aspect of this scene is how Senjogahara is letting Araragi see her naked. Senjogahara built walls around her in order to protect herself. She didn't let people in, keeping them away with stationery and harsh remarks. And even if this continues when she lets Araragi into her home, there is a big difference. Senjogahara trusts in Araragi. She wants to trust him, and so she lowers her guard. She may act standoffish, but this is at odds with her physical situation. She is naked without her stationery to protect her. She is like a crab that has been deshelled. Her showering is the first time we and Araragi see beyond her standoffish attitude and witness her vulnerability, this being in the most literal of ways. As not only does her being naked symbolically show her vulnerability, but it also places her in a literal vulnerable situation. There isn't even a paper door to protect her naked body from him, and where what is Senjogahara deathly afraid of? A repeat of what happened. There is no bigger declaration of her trust for him than the fact she showers of him in the room and then walks past him naked. This is brilliantly emphasised by how when Senjogahara mentions her trust for her father, the scene shows Araragi. The comparison is right there to be made. She's putting all her trust in him, which holds a lot more weight when we later learn how close Senjogahara is to her father, and the weight Araragi being compared to him carries. Sexual scenes are used in the series to convey the closeness of relationships across the series. Shinobu and Araragi's relationship is not sexual in the strictest sense, but it is portrayed as such through visuals to represent closeness. The same can be said for Araragi and his siblings, and of course it's true for Araragi and Senjogahara. This scene then is the start of the exploration of their relationship, of them trusting their bodies to one another, and the trust they have for one another. Her trusting him to see her naked body is the same as her trusting in him to help her, as she trusts him with both her body and soul. Since the main antagonistic force of this arc, Senjogahara's weight loss, takes the form of a kami, a god, it is very obvious that gods and religion play a big part in this arc, and I think it all comes down to the idea of prayer. Senjogahara's mother prayed for her daughter's health and as such got wrapped up in a cult. She prayed for God to save her daughter. Praying to a god being part of a cult became her coping mechanism. She found solace in praying as then she doesn't have to worry, she has passed on the problem to some god in the sky. Now there's nothing inherently wrong with taking solace from faith, but like everything there is a limit. Senjogahara's mother became too enraptured in the cult, so dependent on it when a cult member assaulted her daughter, she could do nothing but prayer. She didn't interject, she didn't even take her daughter's side. The reason being that doing so could lead her to expulsion from the cult. She was afraid of being left alone without the cult. Without the thing that brought her solace, she was ruined by it. She prayed in order to feel better about herself, to not feel fear or desperation. It may have started as a way to ask for help, but it soon became a way for her to make herself feel better. She didn't want Senjogahara to be saved, she just didn't want to feel sad because of it. It's truly tragic. On the other hand, Senjogahara also prayed to a god, to the heavy crab. It again didn't solve the problem, it just made her feel better. It took away her worries, but still she was left in despair, as the problem, even if out of sight, remained. She did exactly the same thing as her mother. She shoved her worries onto a god in order to make herself feel better. But real problems cannot just be left alone. Time doesn't heal all wounds. And well, this is also a major theme of Hana Monogatari, but it will be a long time till we get to discussing the Suruga Devil arc. The point is here that prayer alone doesn't accomplish anything. Religion is good because it makes you feel safe, happy, tranquil. But at the end of the day, a prayer is just words, it is an action. Now this of course is no objective statement on religion and faith, and just what I believe the story is saying, so no offence intended to any theists in the audience. But praying doesn't accomplish anything. Sure, it makes you feel better, but it doesn't solve anything. Instead, action must be taken. You have to confront the issue. Senjogahara's mother could have helped her daughter, but instead she stood back and prayed. Senjogahara could have dealt with her burden, but offloaded it to a god because she was scared. There's nothing wrong with being scared, and of course it's understandable sometimes the burden is too much, but until you confront it, you cannot escape it. Senjogahara had to stop praying to a god, stop offloading her worries onto the crab, and had to take them back and process them on her own. Religion shouldn't be the solution for your problems, it should be a helping hand to take some of the burden so you can confront and solve the issue yourself. This is why praying to the crab initially doesn't work. Instead, Senjogahara had to make a declaration to the crab that she will take back her burden and face it head on. Religion and gods help us, but at the end of the day, it's how we use them that matters. Sure, the cult worship has caused trauma to Senjogahara, but Oshino helped her to save herself through a Shinto ceremony. The arc isn't positing that religion is bad, but that it can be both good and bad. Senjogahara was reluctant to approach Oshino when he wore his priest attire, as it reminded her of her assaulter. But then he, in those same clothes, helped to save her. It's not the clothes that hurt her, it was the person inside them. It wasn't religion that is bad, just the people using it as a way to commit their heinous acts. As we continue in this series, we will again touch on gods and faith, as it is a constant theme in the series. But as you can hopefully now agree, this theme had a great jumping off point through Hitagi Crab. Shadows are another very important and frequent theme found throughout Monogatari. Ogi is the most blatant example, but the Rainy Devil, Black Kanekawa, the Mirror World are all explorations of the idea, and Hitagi Crab being the first arc in the series is also the one to first introduce the concept of shadows. Although the idea of the Jungian shadow isn't really brought up until Suruga Monkey, the broader ideas of shadows is still discussed in this arc. This of course comes in the form of Oshino telling of the story of Peter Shamil. If you only watch the anime, you may have missed it since it's only briefly shown before the title screen of Hitagi Crab Part 2, but to quickly summarise, it's a story about a young man who sells his shadow for gold, but ends up shunned by society and left in despair. The general agreement on the story's meaning is that the man gave up an important part of himself in an attempt to grasp at a materialistic happiness, but as a result was left as not even fully human. This quite neatly parallels Senjogahara, who gave up her memories and emotions, an important part of herself, to grasp at relief from her pain. But even so was still left in despair, losing her weight and becoming quite literally equal to only part of an average person. What I glean from all this is that the shadow, not just in Hitagi Crab but Monogatari as a series, is an important part of oneself that is either not understood or not seen. It is the part of us that is hidden from our understanding and knowledge, but is vitally important in spite of that. If we throw it aside or try to run from it, we just end up as incomplete. One must confront their shadow and either accept it, overcome it, or maybe destroy it. But that more falls into the more specific Jungian shadow that we won't be discussing until the Suruga monkey video. Shadows will continue to rear their heads as we head through the series, but for this arc in specific, all that we need to understand is that giving up your shadow won't bring you happiness. You cannot be happy if you're not complete, and that is why Senjogahara had to take her weight back, to become whole again so she could confront her emotions and make all of her happy. That said though, she doesn't have to do it alone. In fact, the reason she had to rely on the crab was specifically because she didn't have anyone to rely on. It was too big a burden for her to carry alone, so in order to succeed, she needed the help of her. The power of friendship always gets called childish and naive when discussing stories, but I believe it's core to the majority of stories ever written, as another word for it is connection. We've already discussed how Senjogahara trusts Araragi and how their relationship forms in this arc, but I really want to press how important Araragi sticking his neck out for Senjogahara was. Nobody would help her. You could say it's because she scared them off, but as Kanbru says, it's more that people just didn't have the strength to help her, which is why Araragi running after her is so powerful. He himself understands the importance of connection. Remember his old catchphrase, making friends will lower his intensity as a human. He believed connection caused pain and despair, something Hanikawa proves is wrong in Monogatari. He learnt the lesson that connection is the key to salvation, and so he imparts it on Senjogahara. His overall arc across Bakemonogatari is building relationships, and Senjogahara is the first one we see him build. He only saved himself due to the support of Hanikawa, and so he now supports Senjogahara in the same way Hanikawa did for him. He forces his way through her walls, he becomes the prince to her princess. He taking on some of her weight at the end of this arc is symbolic of him sharing her burden. He was the one who helped her get to the point she could take back her weight, and he was the one to stand by her side even after the ordeal ended, because the ordeal was just the start. All Senjogahara accomplished in this arc was getting her weight and her emotions back. She ends the arc overwhelmed by sorrow. However, unlike before where the crab took the burden from her, this time Araragi is here to shoulder it alongside her. That's the difference between then and now, why before she couldn't process the grief and now she can. It's all because of connection. I probably don't need to spend long on this point, as well it's Monogatari and this is one of the most in-your-face and consistent themes in the series, but for the sake of being comprehensive, let's tackle it now as we're going to have to reference this theme for many videos to come. Oshino Meme, the mouthpiece for the series' core message, is well known for his catchphrase, "You can only save yourself all on your own," and this is the most important piece of dialogue in the series, at least in my humble opinion. Araragi cannot save you, Oshino Meme cannot save you, a crab god cannot save you, neither can a devil, a cat, a tiger. Oddities are just coping mechanisms, they are not solutions. The only solutions to your problems is yourself. You can have help along the way, you can have people shoulder the burden alongside you, but the only one who can save you is yourself. No character in the entire series is saved by another, they all overcome their issues by their own volition, by making a choice or action by themselves, for themselves. For Hitagi Crab, this decision was Senjogahara asking for her weight back. In this moment she understands that she can't move on until she takes back the burden. She saves herself by not running away, by not ignoring the problem, but by facing it, as hard as it may be, head on. This is how she saves herself, by not being afraid of her own emotions and memories, of trusting in somebody else to stand by her side, and by confronting her pain head on, without relying on a god, or running away. Senjogahara Hitagi saves herself, all on her own. Hitagi Crab is pretty much a perfect arc in my opinion, and the best introduction to the series you could realistically ask for. Kizumonogatari is amazing, but in my opinion it is unfitting of being one's introduction to the series. It has to be Hitagi Crab, an arc that so perfectly sets up nearly all the series' most frequent and important themes. Sexuality, religion, connection, and of course, saving yourself. Senjogahara's overall arc does not end in this arc. As I said, this is just the start of her quest to face her trauma, and that is so profound, because trauma doesn't just go away, it takes time, and this is why I love Senjogahara so much, as over the series we see her subtly change as she deals with this baggage, something which beautifully culminates in her date with Araragi in Owari Monogatari, and her conversation with him in Zoko Owari Monogatari. I love this arc to death, to the point it was once my favourite arc in the entire series, and I really believe that the lessons it teaches are ones we can use to better ourselves and to help those around us. Because even if it's meddling and sometimes you don't have a right to put your nose places, as shown in this arc, sometimes all someone needs is a helping hand, one that isn't scared of getting stapled or stabbed. As sometimes all somebody needs to save themselves is a little nudge in the right direction, someone to stand by their side or maybe even take on a little of their burden for them. 45 kilograms of burden, perhaps. Bakemonogatari's Mayoi is the second arc in the Monogatari series and the introduction of not only Hajakuji but many core themes in the series. It explores what it means to go home, the significance of loss and the necessity of asking for help. So if that sounds interesting to you, then strap in for the second video in this Monogatari arc analysis series, where we will explore the beauty that is Bakemonogatari's Mayoi arc. So if you find yourself entertained at any point during the video, then consider liking, subscribing and ringing that bell, as I cannot explain to you how much such a small action can do for this channel, and if you want to support this channel even further, then perhaps check out my Patreon. Anyway, on with the video. Mayoi is an arc about Hajakuji Mayori, a lost girl who needs help getting home. The arc opens with Araragi chilling at Namishiro Park, having run away from home on account of it being Mother's Day. He is ashamed of the delinquent he became, and so doesn't want to stay at home, especially during Mother's Day. His mother, after all, is a paragon of justice in his eyes, a police officer who washes his bedding. He doesn't want to be compared to her, or more importantly, doesn't want to, in his mind, embarrass her by being with her on Mother's Day. She doesn't want a delinquent excuse of a son around. That's at least how he rationalises this to himself. He worked hard to get into Naatsu High School, he was very studious, but that went right out the window soon after he enrolled. The reasons we later find out is the incident with the class trial, but that's not important for this arc. Araragi felt he hadn't matured since enrolling, he was an excuse of a high school student, and this all ties into the overall theme of growing up that is present across the entire series, as well Monogatari is one big coming of age series. But here in this arc, the most important aspect of this theme is the idea of Araragi's perceived inability to grow up. It's why he is hanging around in a park of all places, and why he says he felt like the park belonged to him. He feels he isn't growing up, and so feels he must stay in a place fit only for children. He doesn't feel he is growing up, which is one of the first examples of his inability to look at himself, since as seen in Nisei Monogatari, his sisters feel like he is growing up too fast and leaving them behind. The point is though that Araragi is worried about his maturity, or more broadly about the change, and or lack of change, in his life. He ran away from home that day to escape his shame. He ran from his sisters who metaphorically represent his family bonds, since we never really see his parents in the show. This shows his attitude at the start of the arc. He would rather run than confront the issue head on, because he is scared. He took his family ties for granted, expected them to maintain themselves without any effort from him, but that didn't happen. His vampirism is used by him as a reason for the distance, like how he can't physically fight his sisters anymore because he's just too strong. But this is not a reason, it is an excuse, as he is too weak. And so he ran away and came upon a park where he ran into Senjogahara, who after having her weight returned developed feelings for Araragi. Across this arc, Senjogahara tried to make Araragi confess to her because she didn't want it to seem like she was just doing it out of a feeling of debt. However, by the end she worked out that stuff like that doesn't matter and confesses herself. This is the importance of giving your full effort for love and relationships, as otherwise it won't form and it won't stay stable. Alongside Senjogahara's attempts to convey her feelings, we also have the arc's titular character, Hajakuji. She is a lost girl. She starts the arc telling Araragi she hates him. She doesn't want him coming close to her because she doesn't want to make others lost with her. She is aware of her oddity identity, but of course Araragi isn't. He tries to help her as he always does, because that is who he is. He will help strangers, but of course not himself. When it's revealed Hachikuji is an oddity, one that is affecting him and preventing him from going home, he doesn't care. He instead says that that doesn't matter and that he has to take Hachikuji home. And so by accepting the help of Araragi and Senjogahara, Hachikuji made it home. A home that is long gone, but a house only becomes a home due to the people inside and the memories that linger. It doesn't matter if the place had gone, the feelings remained, and so Hachikuji made it home. And so that is a very abridged summation of the arc. So let's get on with some proper deep dive analysis, as for this arc, trust me, there's a lot. But of course we have to start by analysing the beauty that is Kaeri Michi is an opening with lots of Hachikuji, as in the only character to appear is Hachikuji, and there is a lot of her. This is obviously to reflect her loneliness. She has no one around but herself. She lived a life of isolation as the lost cow, as she didn't want to make people lost alongside her. And well, since most people can't see her either, well, it paints quite a lonely picture. Throughout the start of the opening we see her failing over and over, first with the knitting, then failing to get off the bus, and then the rhythmic gymnastics, etc, etc. This most likely reflects her major flaw in this arc, that she is a child who cannot do everything herself. She fails at basic things in this arc because although they are basic to us grown adults, to a child they are not. And understanding she is still a child and it is okay for her to make mistakes and ask others for help is one of the main lessons she learns in this arc. I think this opening overall is a microcosm of Hachikuji's journey in life. She starts at school, which reflects when she was alive, living a normal life. And then she meets the snail, which I'd guess is symbolic of her death and her becoming an oddity. We see her enjoying life outside of school after this, in what to me seems like a collection of activities kids do when on summer break. And I think this reflects her as the lost cow. If the school represents her normal life when she was alive, then the holiday, the time she isn't at school, is her death. She is free to do whatever she wants, go wherever she pleases, but she can't return back to school, as well it's summer break and school ain't open, which is a metaphor for how she can't go back home or come back to life. As long as she remains lost and dead, she will be just that. Her running through space may represent her endless walking, space is endless after all, and so is her journey home. One curious part of the opening is that we see a clearly lost and distraught Hachikuji stuck at a crosswalk, which I think is fair to say indicates she is lost. And then she is saved by another Hachikuji from above, and then later in the opening we see the first Hachikuji return to her mother by the second. This is just my best guess, but I think this is a reference how Hachikuji could be saved, only once accepting the help of others, and also being a direct parallel to Araragi saving her and bringing her home. And of course at the end of the opening we see her make it back to school, saying goodbye to the snail, as she does. Summer break ended and she made it back to school, which as you can probably guess represents her making it home at the end of the arc. However, the fact she still messes stuff up shows that she is still a child, and more importantly, that she still has issues to overcome. The lyrics of the song seem to support this interpretation, since the gist of the song is that Hachikuji is going on a journey and not realising the passage of time. As she says in the song, the day is ending, the year is too, and then after that she decides she needs to go back home. And although this might not be anything since I know pronouns and such aren't the same in Japanese, but at least from how I read the English translation of the lyrics, the first half of the song is all about Hachikuji herself, her using the word my a lot, but then when she sings about going home it changes to you, with her saying, let's hold hands and go home, let's go home together, I want to go home with you, the one who is always there for me and finds me. Which to me really hammers home the idea that she needs connection to get home, she couldn't do it all on her own. And the last line of the song, even if it's a roundabout route, it's not the long way home, I think really makes it clear as day the message this song is getting across. Like how Senjogahara's crab represents her being a tsundere, Hachikuji looking like a snail of course also holds some significance. Her shell, or her backpack in other words, represents her burden. It is the weight she carries. The fact it's a backpack showcasing how no matter where she goes, it will always remain looming over her. She cannot escape it. The crying bear on the backpack also may suggest the tragic implications it represents. Snails are also slow. No matter how fast they try to go, it's like they don't get anywhere, which is the same for Hachikuji. No matter how much she wanders or how much time passes, she never reaches her destination. And so in order to be free from her burdens, she needs to shed them. In other words, she has to go from a snail to a slug. The fact her backpack remains even at the end of this arc then, is a hint that she has not fully been relieved of her burden. As well, she has yet to let go of the material world and ascend to heaven. This might be why Shinobu time starts with Hachikuji without her backpack. As well, that is the arc where she finally lets go of her regrets and attachments to the material world and truly moves on. One of the core ideas emphasised in this arc is that relationships require effort. You must put effort in or a relationship will fall apart. This is most blatantly shown to us through Araragi and Hachikuji's conversation about her parents' divorce. Hachikuji says that they didn't put enough effort in to remain happy and as such drifted apart. Araragi follows up by saying that having to make an effort for the things you love isn't very sincere, that it makes it seem like a conscious thing, and that is very much the case. Sure, the feeling of love itself isn't a conscious thing, but as soon as you act on it, it is. And well, until you act on it, can you truly say those feelings are love? Hachikuji through this dialogue understood why her parents separated, but then also suggested that it was preventable, that if they tried harder, they could have worked it out. It's both a mature and childish view of the situation, something that sums up Hachikuji herself quite well. Araragi doesn't outright deny this line of thought though, but he does call it insincere. This is because he does strongly believe that you need to put in effort to protect those things you love, but on the flip side hates how easy that makes it for you to fail to protect them. His family ties being the most obvious example. Since learning the value of connection in Bakemonogatari, Araragi fights to protect his new connections, but as shown in this arc, through his shame and cowardice, he is scared he has taken his own family for granted and that no amount of effort will restore it. He views his vampirism as a wedge between himself and his family, or more accurately, the events of Bakemonogatari made him realise the wedge that was already there, one he is too ashamed of and too scared of to try remedy. This of course being something he addresses in Bakemonogatari. This is partly why he helps others as he fights to maintain their connections, because he feels he is unable to do it for his own. He feels burdened by this responsibility to protect his relationships. But in typical Araragi sense, he doesn't do the same for himself. He doesn't put effort into himself, which reflects his deep-rooted lack of self-love, one of the main issues he comes to overcome in Bakemonogatari. The key point is that you're responsible for your connections. If you don't put in effort, they may fall away. But on the other hand, that doesn't necessarily mean if you put in effort, they will be immortal. Hachikuji felt guilty for not remembering her mother's face. She was scared of her love for her mother being lost, like her parents' love for each other. She was scared she wouldn't be able to put in the effort. This is why she went to see her mother. She tried to put in the effort to stop their relationship, their love symbolised by Hachikuji's memory of her mother's face, from falling apart, but she failed to do so when she got run over and died. But even after death, her desire to mend this relationship stayed strong. She kept wondering as to give up and admit she was lost would be the same as saying she is unable to repair her relationship with her mother. It would be the same as what happened between her parents. She said they could have stayed together if they just put in a little more effort, and so if she gave up then she'd have to admit she was wrong. That effort can't restore all relationships, and to an extent this is true, but on the other hand it isn't, as Hachikuji's main fault was trying to do everything herself, which we will probably explore in a bit. But first I want to quickly state that this idea of effort in relationships also ties into the arc's third prominent character, Senjogahara, as at the start of the arc she tries to make Araragi fall for her, but learns across it that you need to put effort in for what you love, hence why she makes the effort herself and confesses, as she is putting in the effort herself for the person she loves. Monogatari is a story full of liars. Even if they don't intend to, each of the series' narrators lies in some way, be it big or small. However, for once we aren't focusing on a narrator's lie, as although Araragi does contradict himself and misrepresent some information, the arc's biggest liar is without a doubt Hachikuji. The biggest of these lies being Hachikuji lies to keep others safe. She doesn't want others getting lost alongside her. She understands how her oddity nature functions, and so she understands that if people try to help her, they will end up lost. And so this is one of the reasons she pushes others away, because at heart she isn't a malicious person. Her whole quest was one for the purpose of saving her and her mother's relationship. It was an act of love. She doesn't want others to suffer alongside her, Or more accurately, she thinks she is the only one who deserves to be lost. It's her lone burden to shoulder, and so she pushes others away, telling lies to hurt them in order to do so. However, the reason she never got anywhere in over a decade is specifically because she kept pushing others away, as she couldn't find her way home until she... Hachikuji is a child, she can't do everything herself. That is the biggest lesson our lost cow learns in this arc. It's why she spent over a decade failing to get to her mother's house, but in this arc it's solved in less than an hour. Children are allowed to rely on adults, they are allowed to ask for help when they can't do things alone. However, as said, she doesn't ask for help because number one, she is stubborn, but more importantly, she feels it is her burden to shoulder. She wants to do it alone and she wants to mend her and her mother's relationship herself, which of course is the reason she died in the first place. Because she tried to do too much, she tried to shoulder too much burden, which mirrors Senjogahara in the previous arc, who had to share some of her burden with Araragi in order to not be crushed by it. And Hachikuji has to do something very similar. Another aspect of her immaturity is knowledge. She lacks it since she is a child. It's even said that as an oddity stuck in the past, she cannot retain new information. She is literally unable to process new information, hence why she couldn't make it to her mother's home. The road layout had changed, and she can't process it. This ties into her on an emotional level too. She didn't like change. She was upset by her parents separating, from her life changing, and so she tried to keep it from changing anymore by going to see her mother. But the thing that she has to accept in this arc is that change is just a part of life. That a change in the physical world doesn't mean your feelings have to change. This being shown when Hachikuji considers herself home, even after the house itself had vanished. Another thing to consider is that if Hachikuji represents a child's lack of knowledge, then Oshino represents knowledge itself. After all, he is the one to provide us with the information on the lost cow, or the theory as he puts himself. But the key point here is that he himself doesn't do anything active in the plot. He doesn't do anything to help Hachikuji, instead he just provides the knowledge. The knowledge that is then applied by Araragi and Senjogahara to help her. As knowledge in itself has no power, only when it is applied does it become mighty, something thoroughly explored through Hanekawa and her arcs. The overall point to all this though is that Hachikuji the lost child didn't have the ability to get home herself. She lacked the ability and the knowledge to do so. She was unable to do it alone. And so the obvious answer that she was forced to accept through the persistence of Araragi was that she needed to ask for help. Hachikuji isolated herself, she pushed others away and never accepted the help of others, and as such, well, she got nowhere. She had to rely on Araragi to save herself. The lesson she learns is that she needs to accept the help of others. She needs to rely on others. Because something Monogatari champions is the power of connection. Hachikuji's rejection of people, of connections, very much mirrors Aragi's own arc from Monogatari. He pushed others away out of fear because he was scared of getting jealous of his friends, of getting hurt by them. He was scared of what connection entails. However, Hanekawa reaching out and befriending him is what saved him. Connection was what saved him. His vampirism was symbolic of his own view of humanity. He questioned his strength as a human, his own character. Him becoming a vampire was a metaphor for him running away from his human life, but Hanekawa acted as the son to his vampire and brought him back to humanity. Hachikuji, like Araragi was in Monogatari, is an oddity. She was once human but became an oddity because of fear. Araragi feared himself and Hachikuji feared losing the love of her mother. Both ran away as a result, Araragi giving up on connections and Hachikuji running away from the father that loves her to try get to the mother that forgot her. Both ran away and both ended up as oddities as a result. They remained oddities, unable to change things themselves, all until a friend came by and lent them a helping hand. Friendship saves the day. I mean, there's a reason Hachikuji is described as Araragi's best friend, because friendship is one of the most core aspects of Hachikuji. Without it, she wouldn't have been saved. And as said, as soon as she did accept the help of others, her problem was solved in no time at all. Because there's some things that are impossible alone, but easy as pie with some extra hands. And although on a smaller scale, you could say that Hachikuji and Senjogahara's friendships helped Araragi in this arc too. He starts the arc alone, something directly pointed out. He has an issue he is facing, his guilt for running away on Mother's Day, and his shame for being in his mind an excuse of a son. However, through Hachikuji and Senjogahara, two people who are experts when it comes to mothers, he is able to come to a conclusion. It is their connection that helps him solve his problem. Violence may not be the first thing that pops to mind when you think of this arc, but it is more prominent than you'd imagine, and the thing that made me notice this was Hanekawa's lone scene in this arc, where she tells Araragi off for hitting Hachikuji, not because he hit her, but because he did so without explaining why. As we later learn, this is some pretty direct foreshadowing to Hanekawa's own family situation and the values that were bestowed on her by her abusive parents, but it does serve another important function in the themes of this arc, as this is rationalising violence, or to be a little more specific, this explores the reasons behind why one fights. As well, what does Araragi do a lot of in this arc? He beats up an elementary schooler, he brawls with a little girl as if it's a normal and natural thing to do. And well, to him it kind of is. He immediately turns to violence against a girl much younger than him, because that is what he always does at home, because that is how he and his sisters interact. As don't forget, this arc is just as much about Aragi's home issues as it is about Hachikuji's being dead issues. Araragi communicates with his sisters through violence. Like all good siblings, they quarrel and they tussle, and in the same way his, let's say, over-familiarity with them is a physical expression of their familiar intimacy, so is the physical violence they inflict on one another, and as he feels distance growing between them, this is reflected with him fighting them less and less often, and this scares him. The arc is all about familiar bonds, so to him the idea of his falling apart is scary. This is why he jumps at the chance to assault a young girl, as his instinctual reactions reveal to us all his true feelings and his desires. He wants to fight young girls because he wants to fight his sisters, because he doesn't want his familiar bonds with them to disappear. Because there is a rationale to this violence, there is a reason to it for Araragi, and that is love. Which is obviously in complete contrast to Hanekawa, whose violence is the complete opposite, though that is a topic for another arc down the road. Being lost seems like a no-brainer theme when you think of this arc. Hachikuji is a lost child, unable to get to her mother's house because, well, she is lost. However, I think the word can also be used to describe another character in this arc. As Senjogahara, although not in the same way as Hachikuji, is very much lost in this arc. Remember, she only recently just returned to normalcy after having her weight taken by a crab. She was in a strange world isolated from everybody else and now has been plopped back into normality. But she is quite frankly scared of once again being isolated and not normal. She doesn't want to feel left out or weird, she doesn't want to be left alone again. Which is why she doesn't say anything when Araragi is talking to a girl she cannot see. She doesn't want to say something because she is scared of being the weird one, of not being normal. When Araragi talks to Hachikuji, Senjogahara feels left out, she feels lost. That the normality she thought she regained was still out of reach. This is further emphasised by how she is also lost physically. When she goes to lead Hachikuji home, she gets lost. Even though where they are was once her home, she gets lost in what she thought was her home. In her mind, she now realises it isn't her home anymore, that her past is no longer within reach of her. Her past obviously being the happiest time of her life, the time before all her trauma and the collapse of her family. In this arc, she even goes as far as to go to see Oshino alone to escape the situation. And remember, Oshino was a man she was scared of, because that is how deep-rooted her fears are of being out of touch with normality. A point emphasised in this arc is that Senjogahara doesn't like kids. And why is this? Because as she says in her story about finding a lost child in the department store, they are hard to communicate with. She just doesn't get them, and so it makes her feel out of the loop, confused, like she is the one not getting something simple. It makes her question if she is normal. And so this brings us to another key aspect of Senjogahara in this arc, communication. Much like with the lost child, she struggles with communication. She tried to make Araragi confess to her, as she was too scared to communicate her feelings. She is unable to convey them. This is why she fixated on him being a virgin, because in her mind he is like a child, someone she feels she is unable to properly communicate with. She feels she can't convey her feelings to him, and so tries to make him do it instead. However, she has to bring herself down to his level to talk to him, which happens when she reveals she too is a virgin, putting them again on the same level. I mean, most of this arc is literally in a play park, which is a perfect setting for two virgins who struggle to convey their feelings. It's why the centre of the park is a broken communications tower, as much of this arc is miscommunication, an inability to convey feelings, or a fear of doing so. This arc sets the groundwork for one of the greatest and most solid relationships in all of anime. It shows us the realistic depiction of two immature teenagers getting together and how difficult it is to just open up and ask someone out. The arc opens with Senjogahara trying to pay Araragi back for helping her save herself. She offers him one request as a reward, although this is just a ploy on her part to make him ask her out. This is why she brings up sexual favours, or outright says if he asks for it she will become his girlfriend. However, he downplays her feelings because his own opinion of himself is so low he takes a woman's affection as impossible. In his mind it must just be a joke or a bit of mockery. Senjogahara also doesn't think friends can owe each other things. She feels she can't just open up to him because he will think it's because she's indebted to him. Senjogahara also doesn't think friends can just owe each other things. She feels she can't just open up to him because he will think it's because she is indebted to him. She wants to get all the gratitude out the way first, but that is just an excuse she makes to keep herself from confessing again, as she is scared. And this is the start of a power dynamic. Senjogahara is too afraid to tell him how she feels, and Araragi is too self-loathing to realise how she feels. She tries to make him confess and he finds a reason to play off her feelings. This is so brilliantly displayed in the anime with some of the series' best visual storytelling. As they are quite literally on different levels, they don't have even footing. As they talk, we see them playing on the park equipment. Araragi is on the ground when she is on the spinning climbing frame thing. He is higher up the pole than her. The seesaw literally keeps them from ever being on the same level. He's leaning down on the bike, she leans up. They keep going round and round as being on different levels gets you nowhere. He's under her and she's on top of him. They cannot see eye to eye as long as this fast continues, which is why they only stand on level ground when Senjogahara says she is a virgin. As said, she comes down to his level. She doesn't try to act higher than him, she just tells the truth. And funny enough, once she does this, Araragi becomes more open to accepting her feelings. He's impressed by those who are open, which might be, because he isn't. When she tries to make him confess, she is not acting true to herself, to her feelings. She is instead putting on an act. It comes from a good place, but it is not sincere. Which is why the big turning point for her is when she admits she cannot see Hachikuji. She puts herself in a vulnerable situation, potentially exposing that she is not normal, but she can't be sincere if she is lying. She didn't want him to think she just liked him because he saved her, but she was scared that is what he'd take away from her confession. She tried to clear this up, but that wasn't the right way. She just needed to be honest. She says that he would save anyone in need of helping, that she wasn't special, that's just the kind of person he is. She separates herself from feelings of gratitude and guilt. She loves not his actions but him the person. She didn't admire that he saved her. She admires that he is someone who wants to save people, a kind person who helps people, which is contrasted by Hanekawa, who loved his actions not the person. But that again is a topic for another video. Senjogahara doesn't believe in love at first sight, she instead wants to nurture it and put effort in. Her view on relationships is that you need to put effort in. Which, hey, is also one of the biggest themes that affects all three of this arc's characters. You can't expect someone else to put the effort in, but not yourself. That is what Senjogahara comes to learn and why she takes the initiative and lets her feelings be known. She puts in the effort for the person she loves. The backdrop of this arc is a divorce. It's why Hachikuji was lost and why she died. But that was just because they didn't put in the effort. Know that sometimes no amount of effort is enough. Which at least to me shows how important it is that you put the effort in when you can, because once it's too late there's often nothing that can be done. Senjogahara makes Araragi promise something at the end of this arc, that they won't keep secrets from one another, that they will ask each other for help, because a relationship is not one person, it is two. One's problems is the other's problems too. And I think that sentiment sums up all the major themes of this arc, that a relationship you put effort into will support you through connection and won't ever leave you alone. Mayoi is an arc that lays a lot of the foundations for the rest of the series. It expands on the ideas of connection from Hitagi Crab, but also introduces the series' emphasis on relationships, on how they are maintained and how they fall apart. It shows once more that asking for help is okay, that you don't have to shoulder things alone, and for the first time lets us peer behind the curtain that is Araragi and see the self-loathing person he is, someone who will jump at the chance to help others but is unable to help himself. For an arc about Hachikuji, I honestly find her the least important of the arc's three central characters, and feel this arc explores Araragi and Senjogahara far more deeply. That said, this arc is still a brilliant exploration of Hachikuji's character, and the start of her journey across the series to find a new home. Because to look for a new home, you first have to accept your old one is gone and move on. Hachikaji's arc across the series is excellently written, and this arc serves as the perfect introduction to it, showing us a lost girl trying to get home, who, as we see over the coming arcs, evolves into a girl who thinks back fondly of her past and finds a new home for herself. Bakemonogatari's Suruga Monkey is the third arc in the Monogatari series and the introduction to everyone's favourite Yuri monkey girl, Kanbara Suruga, as well as being the first time, of many, that we see a classic Araragi beatdown. It explores desires, jealousy, and much more, so if that sounds interesting to you, then strap in for the third video in the Monogatari arc analysis series, where we will explore the beauty that is Bakemonogatari's Suruga Monkey. So if you find yourself entertained at any point during the video, then consider liking, subscribing, and ringing that bell, as I cannot explain to you how much such a small action can do for this channel, and if you want to support this channel even further, then perhaps check out my Patreon. Anyway, on with the video. Kanbara Suruga, the kohai of Araragi and Senjogahara. She's the ace of the school's basketball team and a girl who loves Senjogahara Hitagi. At the start of the arc, Kanbara is stalking Araragi. She appears all over the place, talking about random stuff to Araragi and generally being around him. As we later learn, this is her trying to assess his worth as a partner to Senjogahara. Although less clear in the anime than in the light novels, she repeatedly tests him to see if he is just after Senjogahara for her body, if he truly cares for her as a person. On the one hand, she cares for Senjogahara and wants her partner to actually love her, but on the other hand, on a deeper and darker level, Kanbara wishes for Araragi to be unsuited as her lover. She wants to expose his true nature as a womanizer so she can justify her hate, or maybe so she has more hate of which to unleash on him. This results in her attacking him with the aid of the Rainy Devil, an oddity in the form of a monkey's paw, the mummified hand of the devil. The oddity grants 3 wishes in exchange for the soul of the user. It appears like a monkey's paw, and as such we believe it to be one, till Oshino shuts that story down. A monkey paw grants wishes in a way you don't expect, but the devil just grants them. But not your spoken wish, instead it peers deep into your soul and grants the true feelings, the true wish behind your wish. Kanbara first wished to be faster. She wanted to beat her classmates who bullied her in a race, but why did she seek to beat them? For revenge, to get back at them. So the Rainy Devil did just that. It got revenge on those kids, it saw Kanbara's rage and used it to grant her wish, putting all those kids in the hospital. Kanbara, fearing the devil, believing that the monkey paw just did as a monkey paw did, trained to be faster, switching to basketball where she could reign as the queen of speed. She was scared of the devil trying to grant the wish again, of it hurting anyone faster than her. Out of fear she never used the devil's hand again, all until she saw Araragi dating Senjogahara. Kanbara was friends with Senjogahara in middle school. No, she had a bona fide crush on her, one that was rejected and left Kanbara depressed. Once entering high school, Kanbara tried to reach out again, only to back off and leave Senjogahara alone. And Kanbara thought this was fine. Until she had a reason to be jealous, it was fine. But after that, well, not so much. As soon as she understood that somebody else, that Araragi, got through to Senjogahara, she lost it. She didn't want them dating, she wanted to date Senjogahara, and so she wanted Araragi gone. Her wish on the surface may have been to be with Senjogahara, but deep down she once again just wanted to hurt Araragi. Hurt the man who stole away her first love, hurt the man who she was envious of. And so the Rainy Devil complies, beating Araragi to a pulp. With his top tier detective skills, Araragi works out quite quickly who the identity of his attacker is, and because he is Araragi, he doesn't blame her for attacking him and instead takes her to see Oshino to try help her. The solution reached being a battle to the death between Araragi and the Rainy Devil. No, between Araragi and Kanbara. After all, it's not just the monkey's paw that attacks him, but Kanbara's feet too. If Kanbara fails to kill him, then the devil will not be able to fulfill the wish and hence will leave Kanbara alone. So all Araragi needs to do is not die, making the wish void. At least that is what he believes the plan to be. Instead, Oshino calls Senjogahara to the scene, and the real loophole in the wish takes effect. If Araragi dies, then Senjogahara will kill Kanbara, but if Senjogahara kills Kanbara, the two can't be together, and hence the wish is voided. Love overpowers hate. As although the Rainy Devil does look deep down to your true desires, the heart of your wish, it doesn't just disregard the surface wish that's made. Sure, Kanbara didn't say beat up my classmates, but by doing so the wish was still granted. Her subconscious wish to hurt them aligned with her surface wish to be faster than them in a race. And well, why did she want to kill Araragi? Out of jealousy. Because as her surface wish stated, she wanted to be with Senjogahara. The devil doesn't grant wishes in unexpected ways, it grants wishes using your true desires and feelings. those beings' feelings of hate and envy. If it killed Araragi, Senjogahara would hate Kanbaru, they would never get together, voiding the surface wish, and while also if Kanbaru is killed, again they can't be together. The devil, not able to grant the wish, cannot pursue killing Araragi again, but at the same time it cannot disappear because it is yet to grant a wish, hence it will remain attached to Kanbaru's arm, and remain as a constant reminder of her past and her sins. And before anyone comments about how I am misunderstanding how the contract was voided, as I agree the explanation isn't all that clear, this is the exact description Araragi gives in the Bakemonogatari voiceover, so trust me, this is what happened. But anyway, the wish was voided. Leaving Kanbaru with no place to run and no monkey paw to fall back on, she faces her feelings head on, confessing to her senpai, and then is rejected, giving her closure, but at the same time not absolving her of her sins. From just this quick overview, I think a few themes such as inner conflict, wishes and maturity all jump out, and although we will explore all of these shortly, first we have to explore the beauty that is ambivalent, having mixed feelings or contradictory ideas about something or someone. Could there be a more appropriate word to describe Kanbaru in this arc? Although I don't hear anyone really praising this opening, it's a personal favourite of mine, with some absolutely amazing visual storytelling to boot. This whole opening, at least in my opinion, as this is just my interpretation, not any objective truth, is set in Kanbaru's mind. It's a physical expression of her mental turmoil. The opening starts with basketballs. We see her dunking a ball, usually a sign of victory, of triumph. Yet it is instead followed by Kanbaru simply sitting down, a sign of her resignation. She is the ace of the basketball team. This dunk represents her prior to making the wish. However, that is sealed off when she makes the wish. She loses basketball, which is why she can't stand on the court any longer and so must sit down. But basketball is still around her. Basketballs are. They are literally orbiting her as if she is a planet. In other words, a world. Basketball is her world, but at the same time it's out of reach. Like how we can't hope to grasp the moon, she can't grasp the basketball satellites that orbit her. And at the same time she cannot escape them. They will always remain hanging in the sky, just out of reach. Something that brings her grief and hardship, since with the monkey paw's appearance, she is now barred from basketball, something she genuinely loves. We pan out from Kanbaru, her getting smaller, a representation of her isolation. She is all alone, with the lyrics saying, "I stood there completely frozen, as if rooted to the spot." She's stuck in endless isolation, only able to gaze at her loves, basketball and Senjogahara, from afar. Which is why we next see Senjogahara and Araragi. She's quite literally a third wheel in this situation, watching them from afar. Because as we see in this arc, she is a disconnected party. She is just Senjogahara's old kohai. We see Senjogahara's face, but only Araragi's ahoge, because Kanbaru isn't seeing him as a person, as an individual, just as an obstacle in her love. It's further shown in the show proper by how Kanbaru just sees Araragi as a silhouette. Senjogahara in contrast is shown sitting like she is on some throne. She is the perfect idol in Kanbaru's eyes. Also notice where Kanbaru is situated, quite literally between them, as she acts as a wedge between them in this arc, in an attempt to split them up and steal back Senjogahara for herself. The next visual shows Kanbaru and Senjogahara moving in opposite directions, a sign of their separation and the distance that grew between them. The fact they phase through one another shows how truly disconnected they now are from each other's lives. Something backed up by the lyrics which say, "Our worlds strayed from each other." After that we see Kanbaru still stuck on the basketball court, but now surrounded by dozens of rainy devils. This is because she can't escape from her true feelings. They are closing in on her, threatening to take her over. The lyrics say, "I can't shake off these contradictory feelings," because she understands that these feelings, her inner ones represented by the rainy devil, don't make sense, yet she still pursues them anyway. Accepting she must act on her feelings, her bandages expand out into a giant lily. Lilies in this opening are very symbolic, as the Japanese word for a lily is yori, and well, if you know, you know. Yori is the Japanese word for girls love, or lesbians, so in this opening, lilies represent Kanbaru's feelings of love for Senjogahara. Her bandages turning into a lily then is her love combining with her hate, since the devil's arm represents her dark emotions of hate and envy. This may reference her second wish on the paw. Her surface wish was one of love, to be with Senjogahara, but the deeper one was one of hate, to kill Araragi. Her actions were fueled by both love and hate, hence why this flower is formed from hate but represents love. We see some visuals of Kanbaru sucking candy and chewing gum, which feels like it might be a reference to something. Not something I recognise at least, so on the off chance it's not a reference, then maybe it ties into her being childish, another instance of her fixation on the past and not growing up beyond her childish middle school crush. I don't know, that might be a bit of a reach. And then we see loads of lilies, with Kanbaru running across them. This is her pursuing her feelings, in other words her trying to rekindle her connection with Senjogahara, aka the plot of this arc. She runs and jumps until she finds Senjogahara stood atop a mountain of stationery. However, Senjogahara's already left that behind. She's overcome her issues, so this version we see Kanbaru running towards is just an image of the past. Their relationship is gone, and so to represent this, Senjogahara cuts Kanbaru in half, severing their past relationships, but also cuts the flowers. This is rejection, her rejection of Kanbaru and her girl's love. As well, this is the only time in the opening where the colours are vivid. The whole opening is washed out, almost faded, as if to show how Kanbaru's relationship with Senjogahara is fading away, or maybe as another example of her looking at the past that's fading away, backed up by how the lyrics say, "This is not the future I've been longing for," with her choosing to look back at her fond memories of the past and confront the present. But she can't do this forever, hence the fading colours, and so only when she is rejected, she is snapped back to reality and to the present, hence the vivid colours. Though I must admit, I did just lie a little, as there is also one other vivid colour in the opening, and that is the basketball hoop right at the start of the opening, which most likely is because she has to face the present reality that she can no longer play basketball. It's a solid reality she cannot escape from, hence why she instead looks back at the other things she loves, Senjogahara, for the rest of the opening, all until that too is crushed, or I guess cut, and that's why the opening ends as she runs out of past to look back at fondly. Damn, can we just all agree how amazing that opening is on visual storytelling level? It is superb. Sure, maybe a bit straightforward in terms of Monogatari openings, but god is it amazing nonetheless. I know this is a Kanbaru arc, but first let's talk about Senjogahara, as although her screen time is quite limited in this arc, what we do see speaks volumes of her maturation from Hitagi Crab onwards. I mean, the first clear sign is her admitting she no longer has a stapler to hand, and remember, her stationery was her defense mechanism, her way of keeping people away, so her feeling comfortable without them on hand shows how much safer she now feels and how she's able to let others in. Something even more clearly shown by how she basically does exactly what Araragi did to her in Hitagi Crab to Kanbaru in this arc. She reaches out, she sticks her nose in someone else's problem. She was proactive, saving Araragi from being beaten to death and helping Kanbaru to find closure and understand her feelings aren't wrong, but that some feelings will never go reciprocated. As the series continues, we see more and more examples of this new Senjogahara, the most obvious examples being in Nekomonogatari Shiro and Koimonogatari. But this show of care to help Kanbaru is the first example of the true person Senjogahara is underneath, a person worthy of standing by Araragi's side, even if she doesn't believe that herself, all the way into the monster season. Who would have guessed it? A SephTheSin video where Seph talks about connection. I know I sound like a broken record with how much I bang on about connection, how I feel it's core to most of the series I talk about on this channel, but this is my video, and if I want to talk about how panties equate to connection, then I will talk about how panties equate to connection. However, before the panty talk commences, first let's all agree, this is an arc about a lost connection. Kanbaru does everything she does as a result of her connection, or well, her broken connection with Senjogahara. Kanbaru, after all, is alone. The reason she made her first wish on the monkey's paw was because she felt excluded by her classmates. She was alone and so wanted revenge on those who left her in isolation. And her second wish was again because of this same reason. She missed her connection with Senjogahara and she hated how Araragi had taken her place. She envied Araragi and the connection he had to Senjogahara because she knew it was something she didn't have. Senjogahara is quite literally her world, and so without her, Kanbaru not only felt alone, but as if her entire world had been uprooted. She had other relationships, other connections, sure, but not like the one she lost. Her actions in this arc were fueled by her lack of connection, and the arc ends, it resolves, with her reforming a connection, as that is all Kanbaru needed at the end of the day, a connection to fill the hole in her heart. She didn't need to be loved by Senjogahara, she just wanted to stand by her side, to once again form a connection with her. But okay, enough of that, you want to hear me talk about panties. Now, I've already mentioned this in my Araragi character analysis, but if you haven't seen it, then let me recap. Basically, throughout Kizumonogatari, Hanekawa's panties are used as a physical representation of her and Araragi's relationship. First he sees them by accident, representing a fluke meeting, then he asks to see them, this showing his pursuit of friendship, but by just looking it shows he is still reluctant. As well, do remember his mindset in this part, the whole, friends bad stick. And then when she gives them to him, and more importantly he takes them, this is him accepting her as a friend. I explain it a bit better in my Araragi video, and will explain it again in detail when we get to the Kaomi Fan Park analysis, but for now that's the gist. Panties overall in the series represent friendship. It's why the only characters who flaunt their panties around are Hanikawa, Aragi's first friend, and Hachikuji, his best friend. But what does all this have to do with Suruga Monkey? Now this might be a reach and a half, but I do believe this was intentional, as we do not see Kanbaru's panties, but what we do see is her bike shorts. This scene right here should have been a panty shot, but we were robbed because of Kanbaru's bike shorts. If seeing panties is a metaphor for friendship, then what is being basically cock-blocked? It's because her feelings aren't genuine. Her approach on Araragi at the start of the arc are not only of a desire to be friends with him, they are out of envy and hate. A meaningful connection, a friendship cannot be formed between them. There's a rift of hate that prevents it, and so Araragi cannot lay eyes on her panties. This is the first sign we get that Kanbaru's intentions aren't positive, that her excuse of wanting to get close to him was just that, an excuse. This is further expanded on when she goes on about whether she is wearing panties under her bike shorts, and if not, are her bike shorts now her panties? Because in that case, then did he technically see her panties, but he didn't realise? Much like how he first thought she was trying to be friends with him without realising her true motives. Eyes are the windows to the soul, and panties the windows to the friendship. And if you want to just imagine that I never said a word about panties, then go ahead, as we will swiftly move on to talk about... She loves but hates. She is a lesbian but shows attraction to Araragi. Inner conflict is the name of the game when it comes to Kanbaru in this arc. As well, she is a complicated character with contradictory feelings. She's, ambivalent. Her thoughts and feelings are all over the place, something literally symbolised by the state of her room. She buys things on a whim and then never uses them. Just like how she has feelings she develops but pushes them deep down. Her mess of her room is like her mess of her heart, with her feelings lacking in order or stability. Much of Kanbaru's motives are multi-layered. They come from various differing and often contrasting feelings, something excellently represented by her wish. On the surface it's one of love. She wishes to be with Senjogahara, but deeper down it's a wish of hate, of her envy for Araragi. As after all, hate isn't the opposite of love, it is indifference. Love and hate are intertwined, and Kanbaru is a physical representation of this idea. She wants to hurt Araragi, she quite literally wants him dead. But at the same time she does like him, she does appreciate his kindness and understands he's a good guy. She's a self-professed lesbian, but is shown multiple times throughout the story to have attraction for Araragi, which I believe shows the restlessness in her heart, how what she wants, what she feels, keeps changing, because she is unable to get control of her life. To the point her dark impulses literally have taken over and act without her conscious thoughts. However, a key thing that I must stress is that this isn't a bad thing, that having mixed emotions isn't wrong, that we can be confused and troubled. Kanbaru's feelings weren't wrong, her acting on them was not wrong. The problem was, she didn't accept that they were all hers. She tried to use an oddity as an excuse, but the feelings are all hers, and that is a lesson she has to come to understand. You need to act on what you think is right. That is the core message of Hana Monogatari, which is why this arc and Suruga Devil mirror one another so well. The first arc shows the danger of acting on your feelings recklessly, and the second shows the power in doing so with conviction. We aren't perfect, we are flawed, and our mindsets often don't make sense. Kanbaru idolised Senjogahara and comes to do the same for Araragi, and this comes back to the root of the problem. She thinks people are perfect, that we are clean without contradictory thoughts or messy emotions. That might be why she was unable to help Senjogahara, because she couldn't accept that her perfect senpai could face real issues, that she was just human. Know that Kanbaru herself was human, that these feelings she feels are felt by everyone. She's not alone, she is the same as everybody else, but she can't grasp this, and as such she cannot even accept her true feelings are not the result of some trickster monkey's paw. We are all ambivalent, we aren't just medicine or poison, we are something in the middle. We are all ambivalent, we aren't just medicine or poison, we are something in the middle. Toei's catchphrase was a flawed one, something I think she came to understand herself, and that's why I believe she passed on the monkey's paw to her daughter, to teach her a lesson that we all have inner demons, dark thoughts, but that these are just as much us as what we present on the surface. Humans are defined by contradictions, it's what makes us as a species so great, and slowly that is what Kanbaru learns over the course of the series, and the first step to this learning process was accepting those feelings are valid, that they don't make her any less a person. On the contrary, they are what make us people. What is a fair price? What is a reasonable trade? The idea of costs of things of equal value is pivotal to this arc. Devils, after all, don't just grant wishes, they make contracts. I grant your wish and in return I get your soul. The Rainy Devil is not a genie, but at the same time it's not an evil spirit. It's just a transaction. It doesn't take your soul by force, it does so by exchanging something of equal value, free wishes. Kanbaru cannot be called a victim in the strictest sense. She was the one to wish on the poor. She agreed to its terms when she asked for its help. The one to make the active decision, the one to reach out, was Kanbaru. The Rainy Devil just did its job. Kanbaru refusing this, trying to find a way out of this predicament, without accepting her own fault, without understanding that she literally brought this all on herself, is looking away from the truth, running away from it, because the truth hurts. She buries the truth deep down, below lies of positivity. It's how she copes. It's why she hid her feelings of anger and envy deep down and covered them with happy feelings on the surface. But there can't be such deception in fair deals. The devils are always fair. Kanbaru was reluctant to have her arm lopped off to remove the paw, but as Oshino says, isn't that a fair price to lose an arm for attempted murder? Kanbaru wanted to be helped, but won't accept why she needs it, that she caused her own problems, and that as such the only one who can truly save her is herself, all on her own. If she was a guy, she wouldn't have been rejected. Araragi is only with Senjogahara because he is a guy. This is the rationale Kanbaru uses to run away from the fact Senjogahara just didn't like her in that way. A way of convincing herself that there's just one simple reason why they can't be together. Kanbaru, you see, hates herself, hates who she is, and uses her body, her gender as an excuse when it obviously isn't the reason. She sees Senjogahara as her idol, as perfect, and so she must be imperfect and ugly in comparison. She just isn't good enough, that's all. She wallows in self-hatred. That is the only way she knows to escape her fears, to cope with the fact that Senjogahara just doesn't like her. She degrades herself and her body in her mind, as that way she can justify why her idol doesn't like her. She doesn't like me because I'm a girl. It's something beyond Kanbaru's control, and as such it can never be proven to not be the reason. But at the same time, it can never be changed. She envied Araragi not just because he was at Senjogahara's side, but because he was who she wanted to be, the person she thought she will forever be unable to be, just another source of her self-hatred. Kanbaru once again shows her dislike for who she is, making excuses for why things can't happen based on the simple fact she is herself. This makes her like Araragi in a lot of ways, why her arc in Hana Monogatari ends the very same way as Araragi's does in Owari Monogatari, by learning to love herself. True desires are different from wishes. If a wish is just the words you use to convey your desires, then your desires themselves are things so abstract they must be translated into words to be conveyed. Some things become lost in translation. The desire to want to get revenge on your classmates might become a wish to be faster than them. Because humans and our emotions, our dreams and our desires, can't be so simply put into words. That's why only a devil, something beyond humanity, can see past the words and gaze on their desires themselves. Wishes and desires are one and the same, but they're polar opposites in the exact same way. Kanbaru didn't wish on the palm to help kill Senjogahara, but she did to kill Araragi. There's obviously various reasons for this, such as how Kanbaru didn't understand how her idol could be so human in her suffering, or how she didn't dare interfere when told no by the person whose opinion she valued most. But the key one I want to focus on is that Kanbaru doesn't think she is a good person. Her constant praise of others, her idolization of her senpais, is all rooted in her own personal insecurities, that she isn't good enough, that she falls short. She can more easily imagine acting on her negative desires than her positive ones, because her image of herself is a negative one. In a lot of ways, she is the most accomplished of the main cast, the school star, the basketball ace, yet she doesn't see it that way. She can more easily imagine hurting a rival in love than helping the one she loves. And she doesn't see herself as worthy enough to help Senjogahara, but she does see herself as someone low enough to hurt Araragi. Shadows are the parts of us we cannot see, or the parts we refuse to acknowledge. Kanbaru has many dark desires, many deep emotions and thoughts he refuses to acknowledge. She is convinced the devil is a monkey because she cannot accept those feelings are her own, but of course they are. They are just the shadow cast by her wishes, the lies she tells to convince herself that the truth, that her shadow, does not exist. The Rainy Devil was a Jungian shadow after all, an oddity that criticised and attacked Toei, and now it acts as a shadow once again, bringing those desires Kanbaru harbours but doesn't act on to the surface. Kanbaru wanted Araragi dead, not just her subconscious thoughts but her actions too. She kicked him with the intent to kill, as the feelings were, and always had been, just her own. Your shadow is just as much you as the you that you know. All parts are needed to make a whole. Ignoring them, passing them off to an oddity, those methods will never work. All you can do is face them. Whether you accept them or destroy them is up to you, but you must acknowledge they exist. Which is what Kanbaru does. She exposes her true feelings to the world, and so can no longer deny them. She has to choose. She has no choice but to accept them. She takes a good long look at herself and decides it's not good enough, that she can do better, that she can't just go and be overtaken by her demons, that she can do better. But not because she is a bad person or because she is inferior, but because she is Kanbaru Suruga and she should take pride in that fact. The takeaway lessons from this arc are numerous. Be honest with your feelings, understand we're all just human, don't hate yourself for being you, and most importantly to me, don't give in to your inner demons. Because if you aren't careful, they might take over and consume your life. The Rainy Devil just brings out your dark desires. It brings out those parts of yourself you are scared of, your shadow you want to keep buried. But by suppressing these feelings, you are just letting them fester. Fester until they become too strong and overtake you. Kanbaru gave in to her demons. She was too scared to act on her desires herself. Those feelings, in and of themselves, aren't a bad thing. They are just a part of the whole that is you. But you need to keep them in check. Or better yet, you have to use them as a lesson to improve. To overcome her first wish, her desires of hate and revenge, Kanbaru trained to get faster to escape the devil's power. She bettered herself. A wish didn't make her faster, but her own efforts did. She used her dark desires as motivation to become better, to escape them and become a person who has no fear of being ruled by these feelings and desires. By training to counter this wish, she became faster. And more importantly, she discovered basketball, her second love behind Senjogahara. One of her greatest loves was discovered due to her own actions of self-betterment, due to her fighting back against her dark desires, which were personified by the wish. Kanbaru of course didn't realise this, but this is exactly what she was doing. It's the same with her second wish. She had to open up to Senjogahara. She had to face rejection and not run away, to once again escape the devil. And by doing so, she once again bettered herself. The devil brought out the worst in her, and so she had to bring out the best in herself to best it, to escape it, to become strong enough where its effects no longer mean squat. The devil forced her to become better, to self-better, and well, maybe this is the reason her mother left that mummified left hand to her, as a motivation tool to her daughter, a lesson in your inner demons and how you choose to face them. Suruga Monkey is rather basic when you boil it down to its most basic elements. A girl has a hateful heart but blames those feelings on an oddity, and when she is told these feelings are her own, she has to open up and accept them to save herself. But that doesn't mean it is any less incredible, as it's a lesson we can all learn, that we all have dark thoughts, that we all have unreasonable desires, but that doesn't make us bad people. However, the thing is, if you try to distance yourself from those desires, try to blame them on something else, then you aren't fixing the issue, you are just deflecting. We aren't all good, we all have flaws and negative traits, but that doesn't make us bad people. We may look up to people as idols, but they are still human like us, they have the same struggles as us, the same flaws, and they also have negative traits. We all make mistakes, we all think dark things, but that doesn't outweigh the rest of us. As nobody is perfect, and to hold yourself to that standard is wrong. Don't let your demons overtake you, but also understand that you are only human. That's the biggest takeaway I got from this arc, so if you have a different takeaway, then please comment down below. I'd love to hear what you got to say. Bakemonogatari's Nadeko Snake is the fourth arc in the Monogatari series, which introduces us all to Sengoku Nadeko, the snake girl who victimizes herself so much she kind of ceases to be a victim, but before all that, she's just a simple girl who is bound up in snakes. And judging by a poll I posted on this channel, this is not everyone's favourite arc. But still, I feel there is a lot of depth people miss in this arc, which I will hopefully convince you of today. So if that sounds interesting to you, then strap in for the fourth video in the Monogatari arc analysis series, where we will explore the beauty that is Bakemonogatari's Nadeko Snake. So if you find yourself entertained at any point during the video, then consider liking, subscribing and ringing that bell, as I cannot explain to you how much such a small action can do for this channel. And if you want to support this channel even further, then perhaps check out my Patreon. Anyway, on with the video. Nadeko Snake is an arc about Sengoku Nadeko, the first true victim in the Monogatari series. This arc starts with Araragi and Kanbaru climbing the steps of North Shore Heavy Shrine to run a little errand for Oshino. In the novel, we get a long fun conversation of Kanbaru and Araragi discussing various things, such as the 13th zodiac sign, but in the anime this is trimmed down to feature only the most key of events. The big one being the pair passing Sengoku as she runs down the steps. She is running away from the aftermath she left at the shrine. She's making a quick escape so her handiwork isn't seen because, like with her love for Araragi and her body, she's once again embarrassed. What she did in the shrine becomes clear to Araragi and Kanbaru shortly after they make it to the top of the mountain. Snakes cut up and pinned to the tree by owls, dozens and dozens of corpses litter the shrine, and as Araragi works out, this is the handiwork of Sengoku. Following her after seeing her in the bookstore, Araragi catches her in the act, bringing her back to his place so they can work out what's going on. Meme reenactment commences, and we learn that Sengoku has been bound by an oddity, a Jaganawara. It's a snake oddity that was unleashed upon her by a curse made by her friend after the boys she liked confessed to Sengoku, and Sengoku rejected them. In retaliation, this friend brought a curse charm of Kaiki, using it to curse Sengoku. Now at the time we don't know that the man to sell these charms is Kaiki, but in retrospect it makes a lot of sense. After all, the charms don't really work, they are a sham. It's only because Sengoku tried to remove it that the curse went off to begin with. And also, speaking of Kaiki, the reason the snakes in this part are white is because white snakes in Japanese culture represent money and fortune. And well, since Kaiki sold these snakes summoning curses for money and to grow his own fortune, the symbolism checks out. White snakes also represent good fortune, with it being said seeing a white snake is an extremely lucky omen. This may also apply to Sengoku, as although being cursed by this snake may appear on the surface to be a bad omen, it was actually the excuse Sengoku needed to once again pursue Araragi, making it to her actually good luck. This could mirror her overall character, playing the victim to her own gain, like how she gained a good thing out of this curse. After an uncomfortable scene of Sengoku in Nothing But Bloomers, Araragi consults Oshino and is given a charm that in theory should rid Sengoku of the snake. However, in reality it does not, because unknown to everyone is that there was not one snake, but two. And whereas the first snake set on her by her friend just constricted her and caused her pain, a representation of her friend's anger and envy, the second snake set on her by the boy she rejected began to sexually assault her, violating her in a way that represents not only the boy's anger of being rejected, but the lust he feels for her as well. Araragi pulls off the snake, fighting it himself and just getting made an absolute fool of. The fact Araragi is the one to pull off this lust-fueled snake is symbolic of Araragi trying to preserve her innocence. He sees her as nothing but a child, looking away from all the sexual and implicit actions she makes towards him later in the series. He doesn't want to see her as anything but his little sister's friend, as a little sister, and so he pulls off the snake of lust to stop his image of her being ripped apart. Of course he also wanted to save her, but on a deeper level he just didn't want to see her sexualized, something which may have been foreshadowed when he is conflicted on whether to say she turned him on or not. The snake in the end gets away, going back to the boy who unleashed it on the world to begin with, in a way bringing the hate full circle. However, Araragi, by trying to stop it, was interrupting that circle, as Kanbaru says to him he shouldn't forget who really needs saving. Araragi risked his own life to stop a boy who almost killed his friends. In some ways it's commendable, but in others it's just plain foolish. It's his hero complex in full swing again, or more cynically his lack of any self-worth rearing its ugly head. The arc ends of Sengoku thanking Araragi for saving her, even though in his own mind, he failed. Quite ironic, since this is the only time in Bakemonogatari where the person he is trying to save actually needs saving. But we will dive a bit deeper into the many flaws of Araragi in a bit. First though, we need to discuss the meme glory that is. Rene circulation is by far the most well-known and recognisable part of Monogatari, which is why such an egregious English version exists. But even if it's passed off by most as just a fun anime song with cute visuals, I, as always, believe there is a lot of deep symbolism within this opening, which we will now explore. The opening starts with Sengoku looking at the camera from various positions, almost as if she is asking for attention, most likely from Araragi. As you will soon notice, a lot of the stuff in this arc revolves around Araragi. A classic Pocky snap follows, which may be a reference to what would happen if the snake had succeeded, or maybe it's foreshadowing for a snap in Otori Monogatari, or it's just a fun snap, who knows. We then see Sengoku walking with ripples appearing every time she steps, and although not yet relevant, keep these ripples in mind as they will soon become very symbolic. And by soon I mean the next shot, as we see Araragi and Sengoku walking in opposite directions. Araragi is darker, almost shaded, as he is no longer close to Sengoku, Ever since Tsukiji and Sengoku went to different schools, Sengoku has no longer been able to be close to Araragi. The ripples under their feet then represent their effects on one another. Sengoku's ripples don't reach him as she has no effect on his life, to the point he doesn't even remember her name when he first sees her. But his touch her, because even if he is far away from her, he still affects her. She is in love with him, and that love affects every aspect of her life. I mean, it's the love that made her reject the boy and made the events of the arc occur to begin with. So in that sense, you could also say that the ripples represent the rippling effect of your actions and their consequences. She looks at him while he walks away, as once again she loves him and wants to be with him, but he doesn't remember her or think about her, hence why he doesn't look at her back. The visuals saying like and love are quite self-explanatory. It's Sengoku questioning her own feelings for Araragi, then some classic foreshadowing of her dream to be a mangaka, the fact she is seen doing it day and night being a testament to its importance to her, as once again it is her dream. And although it might be a reach, maybe the fact she's doing it at night when we dream is another emphasis on this being her dream. Next are some visuals of her falling, possibly because she has fallen in love, or because she is being dragged down by her feelings. We get another scene of her and Araragi walking, but this time she's walking towards him rather than past him. If the before scene references them passing at the start of the arc and the distance between them, then this time it shows the events of the arc with her physically getting closer to him as a metaphor for her once again pursuing him. However, he still doesn't look at her, as he is unable to accept her feelings since he still just sees her as a little sister. The height difference is really played up in this scene too, which I believe emphasises this point. Many scenes of her smiling follow, which if the opening is concurrent with the events of the arc, should reference how she now has reconnected with him and hence she is happy because she is once again with her Kayomi Oni-chan. Her praying is of specific note, as not only might it reference her becoming a god later on, but also how the events of the arc are something she prayed for, a good omen rather than a bad one, as I previously explained. It zooms out to show multiple Sengokus, which possibly could mean she prayed for such a thing to happen again and again, or a hint towards her personality switches later in the series. I really ain't that sure. And finally we get a very sus smile, since now she has reconnected with Araragi, she can try to make her move. Another thing to note is the frequent use of shadows throughout this opening, which may represent her shadow, in other words her other side, something which again rears its ugly head in Atari Monogatari. Much like with Ambivalent World, I think the colours in this opening are also very purposeful. The pastel colours really to me give off an innocent and childish vibe, perfect for Sengoku, who not only plays the role of the innocent child, but is seen as one by Araragi. The specific uses of greens and pinks may also play into this, green being a synonym for young or naive, and the pink might just be to represent her love, with pink being chosen over red, as it's a more childish love. The lyrics and overall delivery by Hanazawa Kana is really quite special. Sengoku sounds doubtful at the start of the opening, as if she is wavering over her feelings to Araragi, and this is followed by the fast-paced, almost soft rapping, which may represent her anxiety, with her thoughts jumping around in her head. The lyrics themselves tell of Sengoku being in love with Araragi, how she doesn't want to mess things up with words and instead it's fine just loving him from afar, which as we learn in Atari Monogatari is a big flaw of hers, that she treats his love as a comfort for her with no intention of actually acting on it. We do have her question this though, as well Sengoku's thoughts are overall a mess. The Fuwa chorus really plays on the cute image that Sengoku is trying to project. She's a fan of shoujo manga after all and prefers fictional romances to the real kind. She likes them all Fuwa. It's why she calls herself an old-fashioned girl. To really back up my point on her praying to God for this to happen, she says thank you to God as even with her wretched fate, she got this chance meeting with Araragi. However, she is not satisfied with just a chance meeting, she wants more, which is why she says she wants him to watch her forever. As Sengoku, remember, wants attention, but also she doesn't want Araragi to love anyone but her, even if she never plans to actually be with him. She wants the comforts of loving him and him being there to be loved by her, but that's all she wants. The overall opening is just cute and wholesome, which makes it such a brilliant representation of Sengoku's character. As well, what does she do? She acts the part of the cute girl. She acts in a way people expect of her, just a by-the-books cutesy girl. Hence why this opening sticks out like a sore thumb in Bakemonogatari and feels like it's fit more in some rom-com, as this is the image that she presents, rather than her true self, which of course we later see in Moso Express. Another thing to note is that when we see Sengoku drawing manga in the opening, she is drawn in her usual colour scheme, whereas for the rest of the opening we see her in her pink and green colour scheme. This obviously is a representation of her true self, the one who is content drawing manga, and the image she's playing, the cutesy girl. The fact this opening is all about her love for Araragi is even more impactful now, since as we learn she just uses her love for Araragi as a tool, as a comfort. They aren't her true feelings, hence why they exist as part of this opening, which explores not who Sengoku is, but who she pretends to be. Jizo statues appear at the start of the arc. You might think this is just a random bit of background detail, but let me tell you, the symbolism around these humble statues, it runs deep, as these are statues of Jizo, a deity of children. Now I'm sure the relation between the child god and Sengoku the child, who ends up becoming a child god, is very apparent, but there's a bit more to it than just that. Jizo, you see, is also known as Bound Jizo, and that comes from a story around Jizo statues. To briefly summarise, in a village a piece of cloth was stolen, the culprit could not be determined, so a Jizo statue was bound and brought to court for neglecting his duties, since Jizo is also a god of protecting from thieves. The townspeople laughed at this, so the judge, angered, forced a tax on them all. However, the poor townspeople had no money to give and instead gifted cloth, including the thief who outs himself by giving up a part of the cloth he stole, allowing Jizo to be freed from the bindings as the wish of justice had been granted. The message of the story being that even when bound, Jizo still grants the judge's wish. The wish came true, with the same person to tie the binding rope being the one to untie it, which can be further interpreted to mean that wishes can only be granted by your own actions. A sentiment which is incredibly relevant to Monogatari as a series, as this is basically just another way of saying you can only save yourself all on your own. And on the flip side, a wish ungranted will remain as a binding. And well, I think you might now be starting to see the connection. As what does the Jaganewara do to Sengoku? It binds her. And why? Because the boy who liked her's wish never came true. Because he was rejected, his wish was not granted, and so the snake represents the bindings which cannot be undone. I mean, the name Jaganewara literally means snake cutting rope. Another aspect of Jizo statues is once again in their relation to children. Jizos are often seen alongside roads as they guide lost souls. And well, in terms of Buddhist beliefs, a child's soul without proper time to gain good karma must be judged by the river of souls, exactly what we see happen to Hachikuji in the Monogatari, with the one to help these children being Jizo. As these kids without time to gain good karma are stuck in limbo, they are victims of an early death. Much like how Sengoku is a victim of curses, something outside of her control. She needs saving like a child in hell, she needs to be saved by Jizo, but at the same time she is bound by the wishes of others, aka the Jaganewara, again like Jizo. Very interesting stuff, I must admit, and full credit to Josh Dunham from WaveMotionCanon.com for pointing out this Jizo connection in his own Nadeko Snake analysis, which I will link below as it's a good read and more thoroughly explores the Jizo connections around Sengoku. As already mentioned back in my Hitagi Crab analysis, fanservice is more than just fanservice when it comes to Monogatari, and such a statement could not be any truer than when we look at this arc, as Nadeko Snake has two very clear fanservice scenes which hold immense symbolic weight. First is the scene of Sengoku undressing in Araragi's bedroom. This whole scene is very uncomfortable to watch, at least to me it is, and I think that's kind of the point, as we feel exactly what Sengoku feels, and that then acts as the necessary setup for Sengoku to say, Nadeko! Nadeko! This is how Sengoku sees herself. She hates her body. And well, what did the scene prior do? It sexualized her body. Sengoku didn't want to be sexualized by that boy, and we as the viewers now understand why, because the show forces us to do it ourselves, and then shows us Sengoku's reaction to it. It may be a bit of a questionable way to get the message across, but this scene undoubtedly gets across the pain Sengoku feels. And something that makes it all the more painful is how Araragi, the one person Sengoku does want to see her body, doesn't sexualize her in his mind. Her body then in her mind is a failure, only able to force the scorn of others onto her and not even able to catch the eye of the boy she likes. The other fanservice scene is when she's ravaged by a snake, in what to me is less a sexual scene and more a horrific scene. Sure, the acts are sexual in nature, but look at Sengoku's expression, her movements. These are scenes of not fanservice, but of horror. As that is what this is to Sengoku. She hates the feelings of the boy. The snake is a physical representation of his lust. This scene visualizes the fears Sengoku has, shows us why she hates her body, because this is what a boy wanted to do to her. These scenes on paper are erotic and sexual, but in execution are uncomfortable, depressing and horrific, and those words weirdly enough also describe Sengoku as a whole. This scene then, much like the toothbrushing in Nisa Monogatari, shows how brilliant the direction of Monogatari is with portraying something that inherently is not sexual and sexual, but then completely twisting the meaning to make them sexual and horrific. So yes, I agree that these scenes may cross the line for some, are gross and make you uncomfortable, but there is still artistic value to them. However, that all said, if you personally are disgusted by these scenes, if they make you feel uncomfortable, then that's completely fine, and the arguments that there is artistic merits to them or that there is symbolism by no means lessen your personal feelings on the matter. Just because something's art does not mean you have to like it, just because there is intent behind it doesn't mean you can't feel uncomfortable. In a series like Monogatari, where questionable fan service is so prevalent, I just feel such a stance should be made very clear, and at no point should you make fun of or ridicule someone who feels uncomfortable with certain scenes in this series, as that's just not cool, guys. Sengoku, as already said, is a victim. Her oddity issue was not the result of her own actions. She didn't ask a crab for help or wish on a monkey's paw. She rejected a boy she didn't like and then was cursed by both the boy and her best friend. And although the technical reason is Araragi did Oshino a favour already, it must be emphasised how Sengoku was not charged a fee by Oshino for his work. Not like Senjogahara or Araragi, because unlike them who he helped solve their own issues, Sengoku was purely a victim. Of course, in later parts of the series, we start to understand how she plays the role of a victim to the point she becomes one, and in such a way did cause this problem for herself, but in the context of Nadeko Snake as an individual arc, she is without a doubt a victim. Of course, I can't really expound on this more without leaving the confines of this arc, so all I'll say for now is that Sengoku is both a victim and a perpetrator, but being one does not excuse becoming the other. Up until this arc, Araragi has been very successful in resolving the issues of the girls he's helped. Senjogahara got her weight back, Hachikoji made it home, and the devil left Kanbaru's arm, with the only person being hurt in the process being Araragi himself. However, this arc is different. One of the snakes got away, going back to latch onto the person who first summoned it, and as we see in Koi Monogatari, a whole 4 months later in the timeline, that snake is still attached to the boy. Not everyone got out of this arc fine and dandy. Sengoku was saved, but another victim suffered in her place, something which makes Araragi angry, but as Kanbaru reminds him, he shouldn't forget who he's trying to save. As I harp on about quite a bit in my Araragi character analysis, Araragi plays the hero. He does so because of his own lack of any self-worth. He acts out his role in an attempt to make his life have some worth. Risking his own life to save another's is the best way he knows how to make his own life worth something. Add on the fact that he can self-punish by putting his own body in harm's way, and a picture of a very unhealthy set of behaviours sets in. It's this arc though that really hammers it all home, but although yes, Kanbaru was trying to kill him in the previous arc and he still wanted to save her, in this arc he's trying to save some guy he's never met who almost caused the death of his friend. Either Araragi is the world's purest altruist, or man just wants an excuse to go get himself all ripped up by a snake. This arc is one of the first glimpses at how deep Araragi's hero complex runs, something which will get expanded on a lot as the series goes on, especially in relation to Sengoku, the girl playing the victim to him, the man playing the hero. So then, what is Sengoku's lesson? What does she as a character take away from this experience? Well, not much, and that's again the point. She is a victim. This isn't a self-inflicted problem she has to learn from, but even so there is still a lesson for her to take on board. And that lesson, at least in my opinion, is that she entrusts her problems to others, that she doesn't need to deal with them herself. When she tried to break the curse, she instead just made it worse. And this, as we see in later parts, is a constant of her character. She makes things worse for herself, she plays the victim to the point she becomes one, she is her own worst enemy. The reason she doesn't grow is because of herself, as is the reason she doesn't pursue her dreams, or the reason she doesn't act as who she really is. It's easier to not do anything, conform to what people think of you and let others sort out your problems for you. By being saved by Araragi, she learnt that she can just wait to be saved and that she was right to rely on him. She used him to save herself from that confession, and now he came and saved her from the aftermath too. His intervention reinforced her belief that she can just rely on others to maintain the status quo, that she doesn't need to change. Her internalized beliefs are given credence in this arc. And so her love for Araragi deepens. Her reliance on him, as an unrequited love to make her happy, as a person she likes to avoid being asked out, as a hero to save her when she is in danger. However, this is just a coping mechanism. It's not a positive lesson she learns in this arc. Instead, all she learns is that her flawed beliefs, her flawed coping mechanism, could work, causing her to resist change, resist reality, leading to her snapping in the Atari Monogatari. As Kaiki comes to say, Araragi cannot help Sengoku in the slightest, and this arc says that clear as day. Nadeko Snake is rather unanimously considered the worst arc in Bakemonogatari, and although I'd say it's my least favourite of the 5, that isn't to say it is bad by any means. It's unique in a lot of ways, changing up Bakemonogatari's established formula in subtle ways, as well as showing us Araragi's hero complex in full display, something that becomes central to his character development in later parts. It's almost ironic in the way that this arc, which is considered to be one of the worst arcs in the series, is the one that introduced so many people to the series. I mean, I'll hold my hands up and say, it was running circulation that made me watch the series for the first time. I just wanted to see what anime that meme song came from. So in that sense, I owe a lot to this arc, as without it I may still not have stumbled upon this anime yet, and what a dark timeline that would be. Bakemonogatari's Tsubasa Cat is the 5th arc in the Monogatari series and the conclusion to Bakemonogatari as a story. At its heart, it's an arc all about love, but it also deals with themes of self-worth, friendship, trust, and of course, saving yourself. This will be the penultimate video in this Bakemonogatari arc analysis series, leaving one final video on Bakemonogatari as a collective story, where yes, because everyone comments about it, we will analyse Kimi no Shirene. But before we take a step back and analyse the part as a whole, we've got to finish up with these closer arc inspections and tackle the longest arc in Bakemonogatari. So if that sounds interesting to you, then strap in for the 5th video in the Monogatari arc analysis series, where we will explore the beauty that is Bakemonogatari's Tsubasa Cat. So if you find yourself entertained at any point during the video, then consider liking, subscribing and ringing that bell, as I cannot explain to you how much such a small action can do for this channel. Anyway, on with the video. Tsubasa Cat is an arc just as much about Araragi as it is about the titular Hanekawa Tsubasa. And honestly, I think you could argue he's even more important to it than she is, which in and of itself is symbolic of her character arc, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. The arc opens with a long old recap of the events of Nekomonogatari Kuro, or well, since this was written first, more a recap of the events of Golden Week that have been alluded to throughout Bakemonogatari. The long and short, as we all know, being Hanekawa was hit by her father, Araragi got angry, she told him off for being angry, then found and buried a dead cat, leading her to be possessed by said cat, creating the oddity known as Black Hanekawa. That to vent Hanekawa's stress, attacked people around town, including her parents, before being sealed away by Shinobu's energy drain. In other words, it was a problem that was not solved, a lid was just shoved on top, one which, as we soon see, was not very tight. There's also some smaller character moments that don't really play into the arc's overall themes, but one I will quickly mention is the scene of Sengoku stepping back out of Araragi's grasp, a nice bit of foreshadowing for her true desires, that she doesn't actually want a physical relationship with him, she just wants him close but at a distance, as a constant vent for her feelings. Episode 12 also occurs, but I will leave all discussions of that god to episode for later in the video. After all this though, we get to the meat of the arc. Hanekawa has ditched school and then tells Araragi to do so too, with them agreeing to meet up at Namishiro Park. The fact we are revisiting this location for a second time in Bakemonogatari also just helps to make this arc feel like a conclusion to the part as a whole, with a lot of looping back to past elements in this part for one nice conclusion. Now Hanekawa is lost, she is not at school, she has left her usual routine and now wanders into a new and unknown situation. In a way she always has been lost, as shown previously by how she can see Hachikuji, but this is taken further as she is now lost in a park, the place also symbolic of childishness and immaturity. Hanekawa needs to grow up and face her own problems. Like all characters, she needs to come of age, since you know, Monogatari is one big coming of age story. Araragi discovers that Hanekawa is once again reverting to Black Hanekawa, the key sign being the cat ears sprouting from her head, ears she covers up. And while although yes, any sensible person would cover them up, this is also quite symbolic. Hanekawa plays a role. She doesn't want to be seen as abnormal. She plays the role of the model student to a T to appear like a normal girl, something which in a way makes her quite abnormal. But the point is she hides her true self, and so to reflect this she is hiding her ears. Like all her problems, she hides them, keeps them close to her chest and doesn't open up. She doesn't let others in, others help, others see her cat ears, which is why she ends up relying on an oddity instead. They consult Oshino for help, who immediately decks Hanekawa and then proceeds to be rather useless for the rest of the arc, something Araragi actively comments on, though as we find out this is all by design in part of his grand scheme to help Araragi save himself. Oshino ties up Black Hanekawa and then lets her escape, the reason again being so Araragi is forced to deal with the issue himself, or maybe more appropriately is not dealing with the issue. But again, we're getting ahead of ourselves. And concurrently to all this, Shinobu has also gone missing. Using his newfound connections, Araragi puts together a search squad for Shinobu, which is symbolic of how far he has come since Kizumonogatari, no longer all alone with no one to rely on. Eventually Araragi asks Black Hanikawa to help him search for the blonde vampire. Cat puns ensue, and then Black Hanikawa gives Araragi a bit of an ultimatum. He can get with Hanikawa, since her love for him is the source of her stress, or he can die, which as Black Hanikawa says would also rid her of her source of stress. With a key point of this scene being how we see Black Hanikawa shown speaking as Hanikawa, because she is just as much her as her. She isn't some outside oddity, no, she is one directly created from Hanikawa's heart. She is just as much Hanikawa as Hanikawa herself. Araragi not wanting to die called for Shinobu for help, and the vampire having been in his shadow the whole time, saves him, energy draining Black Hanikawa till all the built up stress vanishes, bringing everything back to a status quo. It's quite a simple plot when you narrow it down to the bare basics, but the amount of themes and details woven into it is by no means basic. But before we get to all that, we need to explore the beauty that is. Tsubasa Cat has a whole 3 openings, one of which is Stable, which we covered back in the Hitagi Crab video, and I will not be covering again. But the other 2, well, they are worth a look at. These 2 openings being the 2 different versions of Sugar Sweet Nightmare, one featuring live action segments and the other being in animation. I'll start with the live action version and then afterwards comment on the differences that crop up when it's compared to the animated opening, as although they are different versions of the same opening, they each give off a very different vibe and thematic message. So to start with, the opening is in grayscale, which much like with Stable probably represents loneliness, and while since Senjogahara and Hanikawa are foils for one another, this shared aspect of the respective openings makes a lot of sense. Another prominent aspect of this opening is the constant use of 3-sided pyramids, also called tetrahedrons. Now of course they look like cat ears and so are showed throughout in such a way, but I don't think that means that these pyramids only represent Black Hanikawa. No, instead they represent Hanikawa herself, since as we all know, Black Hanikawa is just part of her. These pyramids usually represent strength and stability, which is kind of ironic since that is exactly what Hanikawa lacks. This might be why they take the form of a cat's ears, as Black Hanikawa is just the part of Hanikawa's psyche that is desperately trying to keep her strong and stable. Now there are many meanings to tetrahedrons throughout different cultures and beliefs, but it's hard to know which of these the anime staff knew about, so for now, I'll leave it at just representing strength and stability, but there definitely could be more to this. Like how maybe the 3 sides of the pyramids represent the 3 sides to Hanikawa, but it's doubtful if any Kako foreshadowing would even be possible to include this early on. The final last recurring element of the opening to discuss is the constant appearance of country names and then also the train lines that appear over Hanikawa's body. This most obviously is in reference to Hanikawa's plans to travel the world after graduation, but I think there's a more symbolic aspect to it as well. These are all places far away. She wants to travel to them far away from Japan and from her problems. These foreign lands represent the places she wishes to escape to. She isn't travelling for fun, but to escape from her problems. But now the broader artistic aspects of the opening have been mentioned, let's go beat by beat. We see text which says, yeah, after I graduate I'm going to travel. This, as already said, links to her trying to escape, but also this fixation on the future may play into how she ignores the present and her current situation. We then see her alone, a situation common across the opening, as not only is Hanikawa lonely, but she has no one to rely on but herself, leading to her literally relying on another part of herself. As you've probably noticed, all these scenes are in live action. This not only shows a distance between Hanikawa and the rest of the show, which is animated, but also shows how real her problems are, how if you push away the oddities, it's just real. The text next says, "Days and months are travellers of eternity, so are the years that pass by," which is the opening line of the poem Oku no Hosomichi, a poem which in short is about the journeys we go on through life, be them physical or emotional, and how they inform our lives. How this applies to Hanikawa? Well, I don't think I really need to explain that. We see a quick visual of a naked body with Tsubasa written on them, which may play into her feelings being sexual, but also into how vulnerable she is underneath. Her being naked may be referencing her being stripped away of Black Hanikawa and having to cope without relying on oddities. Later we see Hanikawa walking with a clouder of white cats. These represent the Sawari Neko, specifically though she is walking alongside them, possibly showing that she is the same as them. We see the train lines here, which along with what I already said, may show how her body is being taken over, either by the Sawari Neko or by her stress, which can no longer be contained and are trying to escape. We get another live action shot, but this time her body is completely in shadows. Now this could represent Black Hanikawa taking over, I'm not entirely sure. Afterwards is some more shots of her naked body, which once again emphasise her vulnerability, even after Black Hanekawa has come to her aid, because the problems are there underneath, no matter what. And the last shot of the opening is Hanekawa's feet and the shadow she is casting, because no matter where she goes, her shadow, her problems, will remain. She cannot escape from them no matter where she runs, be it into the future or to another country. Now the second version of this opening tells a little bit of a different story. Now this opening change happens in story when Black Hanekawa re-emerges, which is why I think this goes back to animation, because Hanekawa can now rely on Black Hanekawa. She doesn't need to face reality, hence the real in the opening is replaced by the fictitious animation. The opening shot of the opening is Hanekawa stood atop a bridge. This might immediately make you think of suicide and how she wants to end it, but the fact she doesn't is what is important. She doesn't have the courage to jump, just like how she can't change anything, she just puts up with it, suffering in silence. Now this opening has colour, mainly red and blue, and I think these are quite important. Blue I think represents sadness, it's the melancholy of her life, a constant state of suffering that her life is never changing. We see her walking alone in blue, once again her lonely life. Then we see her crouched down with a black cat, that cat then following her as she tries to escape in the next scene. This cat is Black Hanekawa, her stress personified. She crouches down to the cat as if trying to console her stress, but it's too much. So she tries to run away, but as shown she cannot escape it. She's locked in like how her stress is locked up deep inside her heart. We see many faces of Hanekawa, the many faces that exist within her, the many she doesn't let others see. In orange we see her holding the cat. Orange often represents caution. Maybe this is a warning of the dangers of just holding your stress in. The fact she is also sat on a stationary escalator is quite clever. It's like she's consciously choosing not to move forward, hence why the thing that should be moving is not. She is stuck in one place, never changing, never moving. Her standing atop the stairs is also in orange, the last orange scene, as if this is her final warning that her stress is at the peak before collapse, hence she is high up. The colour palette now goes to red, showing her laying on the tracks with the cat, as if her stress is threatening to push her past that point. Which it does, and so she runs, down the tracks as if trying to escape from it. In blue we see the cat running too, because it's part of her. It cannot not move when she does. It's just another somber part of her life. The tracks also being live action, they emphasise how real her problems are, her running away in animation, showing she still is not accepting reality. She tries to escape. The cat goes yellow as if to warn her of what's coming, but she cannot. Hands erupt from the cat, from her stress. The hands grope her and don't let her go. This is her stress. She cannot escape it because it is part of her, but I also feel these hands are the gazes of others, the expectations which once again she cannot escape from if she stays as who she is. She cannot take it, and so Black Hanekawa takes the stage. Her coping mechanism, her way of not escaping those issues, but just ignoring them. She is framed in the same way Hanekawa is at the start of the opening, because they are the same. They are both Hanekawa, something emphasised by the shot of the two about to kiss, with the final shot being a black cat crossing the street, carrying on like it's any other Wednesday, because at the end of the arc, nothing is resolved, it just keeps on going. The song itself tells the story of Hanekawa, of a girl whose heart is filled with feelings, who admits to lying about who she is, who is too afraid to let her feelings be known or her true self, and so bottles them up, unable to say any of it. At least to me, this opening is the inside of Hanekawa's heart, of her pleading with herself. Is why when she says, "What should I do?" in the second version we see Black Hanekawa. The line, "Let my heart be at your side," to me seems to be Black Hanekawa's response to Hanekawa's question. As well, they are both her, it's just her trying to keep on going. Yeah, she has Black Hanekawa alongside her, but that's still just her. The whole song is like a confession of her own flaws, and of the words she knows she should speak, but is too afraid to. Episode 12 of Bakemonogatari is my favourite episode of the entire series, and as such I want to dedicate a whole section of the video to just this episode. It is one of the best representations of romance I've ever seen in fiction, and reveals so much about not only Senjogahara and Araragi as characters, but also the overall point of Bakemonogatari as a story. The episode opens with Senjogahara and Araragi eating lunch, where we see the former struggle to properly ask Araragi out, not because of nerves or fear, but because she cannot articulate how to say it. Much like back in the Mayoi arc, she doesn't know how to get her feelings properly across, she's still getting to grips with her feelings of feelings themselves, yet even with her feelings uncertain, she still goes for them. A nice foil to Hanekawa, who knows her feelings yet cannot bring herself to say anything. This little bit of banter is filled with little subversions. Senjogahara picks the rice off his face, but instead of eating it or feeding it to him, she instead throws it away. Nothing about this interaction follows tropes and expectations, because that is how love is. It doesn't conform to logic. The date itself is spectacular. It starts with a car ride. It is awkward, but it is also sweet and sincere. Senjogahara starts off by asking if he loves her, a direct and to the point question, once again a foil to Hanekawa, something hammered even harder home by her immediate reply to his question of why does she love him. There is no hesitation because Senjogahara isn't afraid of her feelings and so speaks them honestly. It's why she got the guy and Hanekawa didn't, because she didn't hide her feelings. We also get this curious line from Senjogahara about Hanekawa. Something which will become a little clearer later in the video. Once they arrive at the date location, we get one of my all-time favourite scenes in the series, the one-to-one between Araragi and Senjogahara's father. This scene shows to me just how insane Monogatari's character writing is. This character is barely on screen, he has a handful of appearances across close to 100 episodes, but god does he feel real. Everything he says, the way he says it, how he feels remorse for his situation and what it has done to his daughter, how he so genuinely thanks Araragi for what he's done. It feels so human to me, so real. And this only makes the message of this arc all the stronger. You can't have the lesson of a story be that your problems are just as normal and real as anybody else's, without characters who feel real, who feel like normal everyday Joes, with their own problems in life. Her father's presence also plays into the Hanekawa foils as well. He isn't around much but loves his daughter, unlike her father who is around but doesn't love her in the slightest. But I don't think Senjogahara's father is what makes this scene so special. It is Araragi. The man with the hero complex, with no self-worth. He honestly says that he didn't help Senjogahara. It's not him being humble either, it's truly how he feels. He may want to be some hero, but even still, he praises Senjogahara's own efforts. For all the bad and questionable habits he has, it's moments like these that remind me just why I love and relate to this character so much. However, when Araragi says all this, says he was just there, her father says that that's alright, that's enough. The fact he was just there by her side was enough, because that is the core message of Bakemonogatari. You can't save people, they can only save themselves, but you can stand with them, form connections with them, form relationships. The date itself, the two doing nothing more than laying beneath a starry sky, is so powerful. Senjogahara doesn't have much. She can help him study, she has a father, a kohai, and this starry sky. She shows this treasure to Araragi, her most precious memory. She bears herself to him, she shows him absolutely everything. Because you don't hide things in love. You show everything, you be honest, you show no fear or shame. Which of course are all things Hanekawa doesn't do. Senjogahara reveals her vulnerability, admits she is scared of getting physical with him, because of what happened with the cult member. Not because she is scared of a repeat, but because she is scared of that making her hate him. She is afraid of losing him. And when she says this, he grabs her hand. He chose her and he won't regret it, because Araragi Kayomi loves Senjogahara Hitagi. Everything. There's nothing about her he doesn't love. I can go on about this episode for hours. It's just a piece of fiction that means that much to me. But of course there's a lot more to this arc than just this one episode. So I guess to conclude, I will say that this episode, this first date between two young lovers, is the perfect display of love. This whole date acts as a counter to the rest of the arc. It's an example of a proper relationship, not a one-sided love. It shows a girl who overcame her issues and accepts her own feelings, one whose family life is also not great, but is happy despite it. Senjogahara is what Hanekawa wishes she was, but cannot become, because she is honest with her feelings and is not afraid of her love. This arc is about love. Well, a lot of it is. Black Hanekawa manifested for a second time in order to once again vent her mistress's stress. Whereas before the stress was that of her living situation and her abusive parents, built up over 18 years, this time it was her love for Araragi that caused her stress. Love, after all, is a powerful thing and can be equal to 17 years of neglect. That is the power of love. But the thing about Hanikawa's love is, well, is it truly love? Does Hanikawa love Araragi the person, or Araragi the saviour? This is a question that is expanded on in Bakemonogatari Shiro, but at least in my interpretation, Hanikawa's love isn't pure. She loves him because of his actions, in contrast to Senjogahara, who loves him despite them. This is why the question of Hanikawa versus Senjogahara keeps cropping up in this arc. Hanikawa says their teacher confided in her, saying he'd been a bad influence on her, only to go back on their words and stand up for them. Though whether these are just her true feelings leaking out, some envy that is yet to take the form of a tiger, I'll let you be the judge. Hachikoji compares Senjogahara and Hanikawa. She says that on paper Hanikawa makes more sense, and Aragi's reply is quite interesting. First of all, he says that he doesn't love her as he sees her as his saviour, which is the exact reason she likes him. She's attracted to his heroic actions of the hero Araragi, the man who would save her. Yet the reason she likes him is the reason he doesn't like her, because as is stressed throughout this arc, there is no logic to love. Whereas Hanikawa loves Araragi for X reason and Y reason, Araragi says he loves Senjogahara not because of anything, but despite her personality. Hachikoji comes to the conclusion that it doesn't really matter as long as he likes who he likes, and that's kind of the core lesson about love taught over this arc. That love isn't logical, it doesn't make sense to someone looking in, it's something only the person in love can understand. It's enough to make you overlook someone's flaws or even love them despite them. This topic then gets brought up again by Black Hanikawa, her again using the logic argument, but Araragi once again says no, because he loves who he loves. Black Hanikawa says he should date Hanikawa to pay her back, once again emotion boiled down to logic. And don't forget, although these are Black Hanikawa's words, those also means they are Hanikawa's words. She is the one trying to logic love, because she is the one who doesn't get love. It's a contrast to what Senjogahara tried to do before confessing properly. She too considered the ideas of debt and paying back being saved, but then rejects those thoughts and confesses properly, as true feelings have nothing to do with debts. He loves everything about her, that is what love is. Hanikawa for sure loves Araragi, but he doesn't love her back, and that's all there is to it. Because he loves Senjogahara, she's the girl he fell for, and that love is just as valid as any Hanikawa harbours in her heart. But Hanikawa cannot just sit and be sad about her love escaping. No, she is Hanikawa, and so she creates an oddity that goes after him in her place. When we see Black Hanikawa attacking him, we see visuals of Hanikawa making love with Araragi. Attack and love, they are the same in Hanikawa's mind. She has to pursue it as if it's an attack, because she has to unleash her love on him in the form of a beast, because she doesn't know any other way to, because once more, she is a coward. Threads and ribbons are used to represent love across this part. Senjogahara is shown multiple times with scissors ready to cut ribbon. First is when Black Hanikawa tells Araragi to date Hanikawa, since this was the moment that Araragi was threatened with his and Senjogahara's relationship being severed. Threads are strong, but they can be cut in one single motion, a perfect metaphor for love in a certain sense. These threads also later show up symbolically in Musubi Monogatari, but if you know, you know. Also, it is thread that was holding back Black Hanikawa. It was a thread keeping the personification of Hanikawa's love back. And at the end of the day, it is Senjogahara's love that saves Araragi. It's what makes him overcome death, not wanting to self-sacrifice as he used to because of his thoughts of her. She was brave and she confessed. She got her feelings across, not to a saviour, but the man she loves. And that's why she won, why she got the guy and why she is happy. As her father says, this is the happiest she's been in a long while. And Hanikawa in contrast is so sad, so stressed. She relies on an oddity. She was a coward and so she didn't get the guy, instead she almost got him killed. Both girls fueled by love, but the outcomes couldn't be more different, a real testament to the power love can have. Araragi is the central protagonist of Bakemonogatari, and so the whole point of the series is in a way, him learning a lesson. And it is within this arc that this lesson is made abundantly clear to us. Now, a misunderstanding I often see is that Araragi needs to become like Oshino, that the reason Oshino makes him do the snake be gone ritual and then deal with Black Hanikawa is because Oshino is training him to be a specialist like him. And although I can understand why some may think this, it is not true in the slightest, because this arc is not about him becoming Oshino, it's about him understanding the lesson that Oshino taught him, the lesson of saving yourself. He doesn't save Hanikawa as he has no right to, it's her problem to face. You can't save somebody else because they will never learn from that experience. They won't grow and so will just keep facing that problem again and again. Oshino didn't save Senjogahara, he just forced her to stop unloading the problem onto an oddity. He likewise made Kanbaru accept that the work of the devil was her own fault. He made her resolve the issue on her own. They saved themselves all on their own. Araragi isn't a hero even if he'd like to be. He can't save these girls from their problems no matter how hard he tries. He isn't the hero Hanikawa wanted him to be, not the Prince Kishot hoped he would be. He's just some guy, and that is what he has to accept. But also that just because he's a guy, doesn't mean he's powerless. As everybody is just normal, no one is special. We all have these problems and we all deal with them. You don't need a hero or a prince to save you every time you face an issue. You just do it yourself. As we humans have the power to overcome our own issues, we can save ourselves, we don't need saviours. Which is why the climax of this arc is not Araragi saving Hanikawa, but him saving himself. He instead saves himself from Black Hanikawa by relying on Shinobu. Shinobu is his other half, she is his own oddity, his own problems manifested. He only met her because he had no self-worth and because he wanted to be a hero. She represents his own issues, the things he needs to be saved from, which is why he has to rely on her, why he has to reach out to her, because you can't solve a problem if you don't acknowledge that it exists to begin with. In order to work towards saving himself, he first had to make amends with Shinobu, which is a big part of Nisei Monogatari. But this here is the first step, as what has he been doing for the whole of Bakemonogatari? He's been ignoring Shinobu, running after and helping other girls when she's been sat there the whole time. He was looking away from her as he didn't want to deal with it. Like with all things, he looks away from what he doesn't want to have to worry about. This is why she is always there throughout Bakemonogatari, always made note of, yet never does anything, never speaks. As we are seeing this through Araragi's eyes, he knows she is there, hence why we see her, but he doesn't want to engage with her, and so we never go any deeper. Her problems are too much of a problem, so he doesn't approach them, not until he is forced to, when he is shown that he has to, if he wants to save himself. She is rightfully upset at him. She runs away for good reason, because her prince is off saving other girls but left her alone in some dark ass abandoned cram school to rot and eat donuts. He is at fault for this, and so that's why he has to be the one to make it right. He shows her attention, no more than that he asks for her help, puts his life in her hands. I'm sorry for not giving any time for you, so here I give my life to you. Him asking Shinobu to save him is the precursor to him saving Ogi and in turn himself, as he is putting his own life first. He's putting his own safety above Hanikawa's because his life is worth more than her problems. After all, Hanikawa is wrong. She's a coward, she needs to man up and do things herself. Loads of other people deal with the same stuff as her, but they don't turn to oddities. Araragi coming to this realization and calling her out is incredible. It's a complete 180 to how he reacts to Oshino blaming her for her family problems in Nekomonogatari Kuro, because he now understands it, that nobody is truly a victim, that oddities don't just attack people for no reason. That Hanikawa did bring these problems on herself, and so she has to be the one to resolve them. You can't grow if you don't take the steps yourself. Araragi isn't being cruel by refusing to help her. No, he is being mature. He is telling her that her tantrum is just that, a tantrum. It's a child's response to a one-sided crush. And by realising how even if monster cats are involved, her problems aren't anything special, he gains some self-perspective. His problems are normal too. He's not special, he's no hero, he's not cursed, he's just a guy with some real whack-ass issues he needs to work through. And this is the first step to him doing that. He instantly runs to the aid of every girl previously in this arc, but not now, as the person he instead needs to put his own attention to is himself, and by proxy, Shinobu. Throughout Bakemonogatari, he has come to understand his own worth. Girls don't just like him because he can hypnotise them. The fact he seriously believes that is a testament to his lack of self-worth. And while this idea of worth is something he fixates on, he values his debt to Hanikawa more than their friendship. He is fixated on worth the same as he did when he had no friends. Leaving behind this mindset is a step he must take to self-better. The crucial moment of realisation coming when he is about to die. He thinks dying is okay if it's for Hanikawa, then realises he has to live. It's a rejection of his self-sacrificial nature. He sees Senjogahara as he contemplates death, and although yes, it is because he knows Senjogahara will kill Hanikawa, the fact the first thing he thinks of when he is dying is her, says a lot. The whole life flashes before your eyes, but it's only her, because she is now his world. He says dying is the absolute worst way of handling it, and that is some real growth. Before he would happily die to settle the matter, he'd stick his nose in and sacrifice himself, but he now understands that isn't the right way to do things. Another big thing is that during this near-death experience, he says that people accept health selfishly for their own sakes. But once again, these are not his true feelings. He doesn't think about people helping him because they want to. It's his lack of self-worth rearing its ugly head. He can't understand why people would want to help someone like him of their own accord. But in that case, shouldn't he also ask himself why he helps people too? The answer is simple. Because if people like you, then they want to help you. You help your friends and they help you. That is what it means to form a human connection. He is forced to understand that if he died, if he didn't let people help him, they'd all be sad. That he means something to others, just like how they now mean something to him. He was entrusted to deal with the cat, but more importantly to become Shinobu's caretaker. Oshino believes he's become a strong enough man to take his own burden. Oshino was like Araragi's own oddity in a way, holding onto his burden like the weight crab, and Araragi rid himself of his own oddity of Oshino by saving himself, by valuing his own life, by choosing not to die for the sake of another, for telling Hanekawa to go and save herself. He grew up and became a man strong enough to stand on his own, and he does so by relying on his shadow, since Shinobu was in it. And well, is this not also foreshadowing that his shadow is what he ultimately must overcome to truly save himself? That the key to him being saved was in his own shadow all along. As your shadow is still part of you, it cannot exist without you being there to cast it, and to save yourself, you need to understand yourself, every part of you, even that shadow, as that's the only way to save yourself, all on your own. Tsubasa Cat is an arc about love, showing the right way to love and the wrong way. The right way is to be true to your feelings, to not be afraid, and the wrong way is to hide your feelings, leave them unspoken, and bottle up your stress. Hanekawa is a victim of, like all of us, her own actions. She doesn't deal with it correctly, she makes out it's a bigger deal than it is, and tries to condemn Araragi to death to resolve it. Araragi was not at fault for not choosing Hanekawa, because she never even let herself be an option to begin with. He had no obligation to save her, and so he doesn't. He has to learn this, and so he does. This arc is the perfect conclusion to all the central themes of Bakemonogatari, but sadly I know we'll have to leave that for another day. And so that was the final of the 5 Bakemonogatari arc analysis videos. Hope you enjoyed them, but hold your horses, we aren't going straight into the Kaimi Vamp analysis just yet. There's one last video to go for Bakemonogatari where we will look at not one individual arc, but the whole part as a whole, and I'll finally share my personal opinions on why Bakemonogatari is not only my favourite part of the series, but the best damn story I've ever experienced. And if you want to go the extra mile in supporting this channel, then consider pledging to my Patreon, where for as little as £2.75 a month, you can get your name at the end of the video, like Hikari Desu, Ringjack9696, General Tonyos, and Mr. Sputum. So with all that said and done, I've been SephTheSin, the Deadly Sin of Geek, and I'm signing out. Stay safe. Bakemonogatari is the first, and in my opinion, best of Monogatari's many parts. Over the last few months we've analysed each of the parts' arcs, and so we will now finally come to the final analysis video for Bakemonogatari, where we will tie everything together in a nice little bow and explore the overarching themes and ideas that make this story so special. So if that sounds interesting to you, then strap in for the 6th video in this Monogatari arc analysis series, where we will explore the beauty that is Bakemonogatari. And if you find yourself entertained at any point during the video, then consider liking, subscribing and ringing that bell, as I cannot explain to you how much such a small action can do for this channel. Anyway, on with the video. Though before we get to analysing any specific themes, because people won't stop asking for it, let's first explore the beauty that is. Kimi no Shirane Monogatari by Supercell is the first and only ending song for Bakemonogatari, and in my opinion is one of the best in the entire series. It is a song about love, quite fitting since Bakemonogatari, as we will soon see, is a story defined by love. And more specifically, it's a song about love sung by a girl in love, as this ending is a song from the point of view of one specific character, the character who is the centre of this opening's visuals, Senjogahara Hitagi. The first word in the entire series is her name, because the whole story could not have occurred without her. As discussed in our Tsubasa Cat arc analysis, Senjogahara is what Hanekawa wishes she could be, a girl free to be herself who isn't afraid of her feelings. Her love for Araragi, their relationship, is the backbone of Bakemonogatari, and that is why its ending song is all about her love for Araragi. If this is a story about Araragi growing, then is the person who helped him to grow the most not equally as important? Now, the visuals of this opening don't paint a particularly clear narrative like some of the openings do. We see all the parts' major characters doing very in-character stuff, but there isn't a large overarching narrative. Hachikuji is shown laying on her back, possibly a reference to how she was taken down by Araragi. Next along is Kanbru doing something sus to a set square, which is most likely symbolic of her love for Senjogahara, since usually she is represented by stationery, and then Araragi is on his beloved bike trying to do a wheelie before falling over. This could be a reference to when he's hit off his bike by the rainy devil, or could be him metaphorically falling in love since he only falls once he passes Senjogahara. And this does coincide with the lyrics, "It's lonely like that, since he has no friends and all." I don't know, that could be a bit of a reach. In the background we also have the figures of Hanekawa, Oshino, Sengoku and Shinobu. Hanekawa is reading a book while looking away from Senjogahara, perhaps in reference to her envy of her and Araragi's love. Oshino is depicted as a scarecrow. Not only does this reference his dishevelled appearance, but also how much like a scarecrow he is a deterrent, both in that he gets rid of oddities, but also in how he acts as a warning for those who play the victim and don't save themselves, other ones doomed to be in despair. Sengoku is kneeling with her hands over her heart. Maybe this is how she holds her true feelings in, she's protecting them and so her heart from the outside world. And lastly, Shinobu is stood gazing off into the distance, a reference to how she is not the focus of the series, with Araragi purposely not looking her way. Of course, these are all just my best guesses, and these could just be poses for the sake of poses. Now, you may have noticed some of these characters are in focus at the forefront of the scene, and others are in the back. Now, there probably is a reason for this, but I'm honestly not too sure what it is. At first I thought it was those characters who Senjogahara had strong feelings for versus those she didn't, but that doesn't explain Hachikuji being front and centre, so if anyone's got any better ideas, comment them down below. Also in the last few episodes, some additional characters are added right at the start of the opening, with Hanekawa with cat ears, a reference to the re-emergence of Black Hanekawa, Sengoku staring at her shadow, possibly a reference to her other side that she is not willing to show people, Hachikuji snailing on the ground, Araragi and Senjogahara playing Jankenpo, Hanekawa is sleeping on the floor, maybe a reference to how at home she doesn't even have a bed, Sengoku doing something I'm not really sure about, and Kanbru showing off her ass. And then there's a wholesome scene of Shinobu and her two caretakers, so again if you have any interpretations of these, then leave them in the comments. Now another thing you might have picked up on is the colour scheme. The opening starts in black and white, then shifts to colour once the other characters appear. This seems to be quite clear bit of symbolism for her being alone, hence the black and white, and then finding new friends and rekindling old ones, hence the colour. This is backed up by the lyrics, since when it turns to colour, the lyrics say, "There's Orihime, I found her at last," which may seem like gibberish, but trust me, it'll make sense in a bit. Next we see stars falling from the sky and surround Senjogahara. Now these stars represent love. Senjogahara allows herself to be surrounded by love. Also notice the red figures behind her. I think this is her trauma, visions of her mother and the cult member. This is why her eyes are shut. She is no longer looking back at the past but moving forward towards her love being the thing that is both protecting her and guiding her. The figures are red because they are danger, but then it turns to white as it's no longer anything that can hurt her. And in turn the stars turn red, not because they are dangerous. No, this represents love. With her finally opening her eyes and clutching her heart, because the only thing she needs to focus on is the feelings in her heart. Now in the last few episodes of this part, we do get two alternate ending sections to this ending, neither of which has much of a clear narrative, just showing more of the characters doing random stuff, with the only symbolic part being the endings. With Hanekawa turning into Black Hanekawa, as the lyrics say, "These feelings of mine," since Black Hanekawa is her true feelings brought to the forefront, or Sengoku holding her heart, which could be symbolic of her hiding her true feelings. Now this is all well and good, but wait till the lyrics get involved and then it gets great. Now first I have to explain the story of the cowherd and the weaver girl, which you may think what the hell is that, but you soon understand. It's a story about Orihime, the daughter of the Sky King, and the cowherder Hikaboshi. Orihime is said to have lived on one side of a river where she weaved cloth all day, while Hikaboshi lived on the other side herding his cow. These two characters are represented by the stars, Vega and Altair, and are on different sides of the Milky Way, or in Japanese, the Heaven River. Orihime spends all her day working but becomes sad because she is lonely. Her father then brings over Hikoboshi to keep her company, and the two fall in love. As a result, they both stop weaving and cow herding and are such a forced to be separated by the Sky King. Orihime begs to her father, and eventually he agrees, letting them meet on the 7th day of the 7th month, the Tanabata, which is Senjogahara's birthday, and also the date of her and Araragi's first date. Also, it's fun to note that in the story, Senjogahara's dad was the one to drive them to their date, like how Orihime's father allowed the two to meet in legend. In the legend though, the two cannot find a bridge to cross the river, and instead need the help of a flock of magpies, who take pity on Orihime, creating a bridge for her with their feathers. These magpies being the third star in the summer constellation, Deneb, which in real life sits smack bang in the middle of the Milky Way. The 3 stars, and as such the 3 characters in the legend, represent our 3 main characters in Bakemonogatari. Orihime is Senjogahara, a girl who became sad then found meaning in life through love. Hikoboshi is Araragi, the guy who saves her from sadness. And the magpies are Hanikawa, the girl whose name means wing and river, and like a magpie's feathers is represented by black and white, either by Kako, the tiger, or Black Hanikawa, a white cat. She acts as the bridge for Araragi and Senjogahara's relationship, taking pity on Senjogahara and supporting her relationship with Araragi. So now with that knowledge in mind, let's go through the lyrics. First we have That's Deneb Alter Vega, the summer triangle that you pointed out. This sets up the story of the cowherd and the weaver girl. The lyrics say that there is Orihime, but where's Hikoboshi? That without him it's lonely. This is Senjogahara feeling lonely and sad at the start of the story because she is yet to meet Araragi. The opening becomes colourful here, the colours almost like a sunrise, because Senjogahara's dark and depressing past is finally ending and a new happy day is arriving. This is why Hikoboshi is mentioned, because by reaching out and trying to pursue love, she saves herself. The song talks about looking up from a black world at the stars above. The stars are said represent love. Since the story of the stars, the cowherd and the weaver girl is a story of love. The stars are ready to fall as the love they represent is ready to fall on Senjogahara. The lyrics say, I wonder when it was that I started chasing after you. This being Senjogahara's pursuit of Araragi and her saying don't be surprised of them and understand them. This being Senjogahara's pursuit of Araragi and her saying don't be surprised of them and understand them is her fears and insecurities about confessing to Araragi. This song then being about her love for Araragi, how it saved her, and how she acts on it to confess to him, or the first 2 arcs of Bakemonogatari, which I think all lines up quite well with what I said about the visuals. Another interpretation could be that the stars represent literal stars, and that Senjogahara's only friends before meeting Araragi was the night sky itself. It's definitely a possibility. Now the most beautiful part of this though to me is how these lyrics seem like a perfect extension of the conversation between Araragi and Senjogahara in episode 12. Their date, the Tanabata. To speak frankly for a minute, I didn't notice this till my second rewatch of the series, and well, as I've said on this channel before, when I first watched Bakemonogatari, I didn't really think it was anything special, but by the time I was on my second watch, I was already in love with the series. And so when I finished episode 12 on the second watch, and this ending started playing, and I saw the words, that's Deneb Alter Vega, my jaw quite literally dropped. I was absolutely flabbergasted at how the ending itself was just one big bit of foreshadowing for what is probably the most important moment in all of Bakemonogatari. It genuinely did bring tears to my eyes, and it might possibly have been the moment I came to understand that this series really was the best piece of fiction I'd ever seen. It moved me a lot, and as such I hold this ending very dear to my heart, as it's a perfect demonstration of how much everyone involved in this production cared for this story. That all said, Ryo, the writer of the song, did say that they didn't want to copy the tonal style of the original Bakemonogatari novels because he felt the author Nisho Ishin would enjoy the song more if it was more original. Thus Ryo wrote a different song after borrowing the general setting of the novels. So yeah. Still, as I've said many times, a meaning whether intended or not by the creator is still equally valid. Now, I don't think it's a revolutionary statement to say that Bakemonogatari is a big old metaphor for personal issues, with the series' oddities just being allegories for very real and common issues we all face. But even if it's obvious, it's obviously quite important. The oddities in the series, although representing different things like the burden we carry with the weight crab or the parts of us we refuse to acknowledge with the monkey's paw, all represent one key idea. They are all ways of running away, ways of not accepting reality and not acknowledging your problems. It's the classic save yourself all on your own. To save oneself you have to acknowledge you have a problem. It may seem like an obvious thing, and in a way it is, but even if it seems easy on paper, in reality it is not. Admitting to faults, agreeing you have a problem, it's hard. And that's what these oddities mean. They are the excuses we make to not help ourselves, the understandable reasons we use to not face the reality of our grief and trauma. Overcoming these issues is hard, and that's why we form coping mechanisms, why we rely on oddities. As well, we all have oddities, be them healthy or not. We have things we do to avoid stress, things we do to not think about the bad parts of our lives. And so the lesson Monogatari teaches us about this is simply that yes, it's hard, but the reward for doing so is worth it, because if you do overcome it, you do push through, you will save yourself. Nobody else can make you overcome these issues, it has to be you. You have to do it yourself, as only then can you truly say that you saved yourself all on your own. I have already made a whole video on this subject, so I recommend you check it out after this video. But for the sake of being comprehensive, all 5 of the Bake girls have been shaped by their parents in one way or another. Senjogahara gave up her weight to the crab because of the burden of the feelings she felt towards her mother. Hachikuji died trying to visit her mother. Kanbaru was given the monkey's paw by her mother. Sengoku was nothing more than a doll for her parents, just being the cute daughter they wanted her to be. And Hanekawa was in an abusive household by her neglectful parents. All of their issues are in some way tied back to their parents. This ties into the overarching idea of coming of age. Are cast by overcoming their issues, mature and come of age. It's not uncommon for parents to see their children as extensions of themselves. The parent knows best, and so the child should do what they say without complaint. But children aren't just children, they are people. They are their own individuals, separate from the beliefs of their parents. A big part of growing up, of becoming adults, is leaving your parents behind. Not in a cruel way though. It's not about cutting ties, it's about recognising you are not defined by them. That you are your own person and that you are not defined by your parents and their actions. This is why the 5 Bake girls, each in order to eventually save themselves and come of age, have to break free from their parents and the expectations and beliefs they have pushed on them. Senjogahara has to take on her mother's feelings and then move on. She has to move past them and not let herself be weighed down by the thoughts and feelings of her mother. To mature and save herself, to find love, she has to leave her mother behind and become a woman in her own right. Hachikuji had to accept that the home she constantly searched for was gone. She had to understand that her parents' divorce happened and that she couldn't go back to those happy family days, no matter how far she walked. By accepting the present and not dwelling on the past, she was able to finally make it home and go on to find a new purpose in life, well, in her afterlife. The monkey paw was given to Kanbaru by her mother as a test, to see what her daughter would do, be consumed by her desires or overcome them. Kanbaru, by accepting her dark vices are still her, and then acting on her selfish desires despite that, shows her mother that she can forge and walk her own path in life, coming of age. Sengoku has to defy the expectations her parents put on her and stop being their cute doll of a daughter. She has to reach for her own goals, her own dreams on her own. And Hanekawa has to find a home for herself, realising that her parents aren't right just because they are her parents and that she doesn't need to act like a model daughter just to please them. And although a lot of these don't occur till later parts of the series, the seeds for all these character arcs were planted here in Bakemonogatari. If Kizumonogatari is about Araragi coming to understand the importance of friendship and connection, realising that isolation isn't healthy, then Bakemonogatari is Araragi putting this lesson into practice. At the start of the series he has but one friend, Hanekawa, and by the end he has 5. Each of these girls he befriends is one new vital connection. Him relying on each of them to help him find Shinobu is a testament to the power of connection, which is why the moment of him coming to realise they are helping him for no other reason than that is what friends do, is so powerful. Araragi is Araragi. He is dense because he looks away from those things he doesn't want to look at. Even if he came to appreciate friendship, his old ways still persisted. This is why he said that none of them would save him, that people only accept help selfishly. He doesn't want to admit to the truth, he doesn't say what he really thinks out of fear. Yet he gets called out by Black Hanekawa no less. By Hanekawa, his first friend, by the person who wishes people cared for in the same way they do for him. She said by saying all this he is as good as rejecting them, and so he is forced to look back at reality, at his friends. He thinks that they'd all be sad if he died, and it's in that moment that he asks Shinobu to save him, because he acknowledges that he has something to live for, and that is his friends. His arc then is going from having no friends to not only relying on said friends but fighting to live, not for his own sake, but for theirs. Because worse than even his own death is making them cry, which says a lot about his still rampant self-sacrificial nature, but also shows some clear character growth towards a man whose intensity as a human is still pretty strong, even with 5 friends hanging around. Bakemonogatari might as well be called Koimonogatari because it's all about love. The first arc is a girl falling in love with Araragi, the second is said girl confessing to him, the third is unrequited love, the fourth love turned to hate, and the fifth a girl once again confessing but this time being turned down. No matter where you look, love is everywhere in Bakemonogatari. Be it romantic or familiar, love is what defines all the characters in this part, be it accepting love or rejecting it. Each and every character has to confront the love of another and process said love. Love can cause pain and distress, but it can also save someone from sorrow. The idea I think Bakemonogatari is trying to express overall is that love is messy. It is not good or bad, because love isn't some universal concept. No, it is the feelings of an individual, and that individual alone. It can make you do bad things, but also change you and help you become a happier person. Love can save the day, it can bring salvation, but it can just as easily cause sorrow and hardship. Because love is just a one-sided feeling. Only when it is mutual, when both parties are in love, can a relationship be formed. And as shown in this part, that is what brings strength. That's what increases your intensity as a human. It is a relationship of mutual love. Be it Kanbaru, Sengoku's classmate, or Hanikawa, those with one-sided crushes not only cause themselves pain, but also those they direct said love on, as love is dangerous, but relationships are salvation. Once again, I covered a lot of this in the last video on Tsubasa Cat, but Araragi's arc across Bakemonogatari is the strong narrative through line that ties this part all together. In brief, it consists of a few key points. Him gaining friends and learning why that gives you power, as already discussed. Him coming to accept the cruel truth that victims aren't always victims, that sometimes trauma can be self-inflicted. And most importantly, him putting himself first, not risking his own life to save Hanikawa's when it's none of his business. His self-sacrificial nature is one of his biggest flaws, and as such this part climaxes with him deciding not to die to fix the issue. It's obviously just the first step, but like in real life, improvement is slow and a steady process. And this here is just the beginning of his overall journey, which I fully explore in this video here. Bakemonogatari, as already said, is my favourite part of the series, as it to me personifies all of what makes Monogatari great. Heartfelt stories of people bettering themselves, lessons we can take into our own lives, and a overall through line that develops all the characters in meaningful ways. But more than all that, the reason I love Bakemonogatari so much is because of how it came to be. If you didn't already know, Nisho Ishin first wrote Bakemonogatari without any intention of publishing it. He didn't write it for work as an author. No, he wrote it in his own free time, in breaks, between his serialised light novels. And why did he write this 2-volume epic in his free time? Because he just wanted to write some fun dialogue between characters. The simple fact he wrote a story just for that, and it was not only good, but arguably his greatest work ever, really is insane to imagine. But what this really says to me is that Monogatari is, out of all of Nisho Ishin's works, the one most true to who he is. Because the story wasn't meant to be published, it wasn't meant to keep readers engaged, not meant to appeal to anybody. It was just for his own amusement, just a man writing about something he wanted to. Now, you probably don't know this, but I'm somewhat of an aspiring author. Maybe that's not the right phrasing, as I too don't like to write to expectations. I write because I like to. I write stories I want to write. I write for myself first and foremost. I sometimes feel I need to write a more mainstream story, like a revenge thriller or something like that, as that is what people seem to want to read. But then I think back to Bakemonogatari and remember that I'm writing because I like it, and so I want to write what I want to write, no matter how dumb or stupid the story may sound. Bakemonogatari has inspired me as an author more than any other piece of fiction. Not because of the story itself, but because of what it represents. That if you write what you like, then that is okay. The epitome of this to me is my series People of Fate. Each volume is 4 short stories. There is an overarching narrative, but not one you'd grasp at first. It's not a particularly marketable or smart way to write a story. The fact I do all my artwork myself with my shoddy drawing talents only adds to the unmarketability of these novels. But the reason I do all this is because I want this series to be me. Every aspect of it is mine. Even the illustrations I do myself, because I want this story to be the embodiment of myself and what I enjoy. It's a story I'm writing for myself, and so I'm giving it all of myself. And the fact I have the confidence to publish such novels, ones that so blatantly reveal who I am as a person, is because I've seen Nisho Ishin do the same and never have regretted it. As that is what Bakemonogatari means to me, and that's why it's so special to me, as it's inspired me in a way no other piece of fiction has. Overall, Bakemonogatari is a piece of fiction that says a lot. It teaches us about the nature of love, of growing up, and how saving ourselves is only possible by our own hands. It is not only an inspiring work, but one that still feels grounded. Yes, it teaches us lessons, but also that acting on them is not easy. That life is hard, people are layered, and that to become happy, you have to put the effort in. As no one is born happy, happiness is something you have to attain for yourself, with your own hands. Or at least that's what I got out of this monster story, or you could say, this Bakemonogatari. And if you want to go the extra mile in supporting this channel, then consider pledging to my Patreon, where for as little as £2.75 a month, you can get your name at the end of the video, like Hikari Desu, Ringjack9696, General Tonyos, and Mr. Sputum. So with all that said and done, I've been SephTheSin, the Deadly Sin of Geek, and I'm signing out. Stay safe, everyone.